Lucas Reed never imagined that pulling a drowning woman from a sinking car would shatter everything he thought he knew about life and death. When she opened her eyes and whispered his name, a name she shouldn't have known, his world stopped. Because the face staring back at him belonged to his wife, his dead wife, the woman he'd buried 3 years ago. Now, stay with me until the end of this story, and comment what city you're watching from so I can see how far this incredible tale has traveled. The rain came down like judgment that night, not the gentle kind that whispers against window panes, but the violent sort that hammers the earth as if trying to break through to something buried deep below. It was the kind of rain that makes smart people stay home, that turns highways into rivers and visibility into a cruel joke. But Lucas Reed had never been one to let weather dictate his choices, not when there was work to be done, bills to be paid, and a 7-year-old son sleeping safely at his sister's house while he finished the late shift nobody else wanted. The dashboard clock read 11:47 p.m. when Lucas guided his pickup truck along Route 7, the narrow 2-lane road that snaked alongside the Clearwater River. His windshield wipers thrashed frantically, fighting a losing battle against the deluge. The headlights barely cut through the silvery curtain of water, illuminating only a few feet of slick asphalt at a time. He'd driven this route 1,000 times, knew every curve, every pothole, every faded road sign, but tonight it felt different, hostile somehow, as if the familiar had transformed into something he no longer recognized. Lucas rubbed his eyes, fighting the exhaustion that had settled into his bones. 48 years old, and he felt twice that age some days. 3 years of single parenthood, of being both mother and father to Ben, of working double shifts at Hanson's Towing to keep the lights on and food on the table. It had worn him down in ways he hadn't expected. The lines around his eyes had deepened, his dark hair had gone silver at the temples, and his hands bore the permanent stains and scars of a man who worked with metal and machinery for a living. He was thinking about Ben's upcoming birthday, mentally calculating whether he could afford the bicycle his son had been circling in the Target catalog, when his headlights caught something that made his heart lurch. Tire tracks, fresh and violent, cutting across the rain-soaked road and disappearing over the guardrail. No, 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 Lucas breathed, his foot instinctively slamming the brake pedal. The truck fishtailed slightly on the wet pavement before coming to a shuddering stop about 20 yards past the brake and the guardrail. For a split second he sat frozen, his mind trying to process what his eyes had seen. Then training and instinct kicked in. Lucas threw the truck into park, killed the engine, and burst out into the storm. The rain immediately plastered his shirt to his skin, cold and shocking. He ran back toward the guardrail, his work boots splashing through puddles that had become small lakes. When he reached the twisted metal barrier, he looked down and his blood turned to ice. There, about 30 feet below, a sedan was sinking into the Clearwater River, its taillights glowing an eerie red beneath the dark, churning water. The car had landed upright, but the current was fierce this time of year, swollen from weeks of rain, and the vehicle was being dragged toward deeper water even as he watched. "Help!" The scream was faint, almost lost in the roar of the storm and the river, but Lucas heard it, a woman's voice, desperate and terrified. He didn't think. Thinking would have reminded him that he wasn't 20 anymore, that he had a son who needed him, that diving into a rain-swollen river at night was the kind of stupid that got people killed. But Lucas Reed had spent 3 years living with the guilt of not being there when it mattered most, and he wasn't about to let someone else die when he could do something about it. He kicked off his boots, threw his phone onto the road, and climbed over what remained of the guardrail. The slope down to the river was steep and muddy, and he half slid, half fell down it, grabbing at saplings and rocks to slow his descent. Thorns tore at his arms. His feet slipped multiple times, but he kept moving, kept pushing forward until he hit the water's edge. The river was deeper than it looked, and colder than he'd imagined. The moment Lucas waded in past his knees, the current tried to sweep his legs out from under him. He pushed forward, arms windmilling for balance, until the water reached his chest and then his shoulders. The cold stole his breath, making his lungs seize up momentarily. The car was about 15 feet out and sinking fast. Lucas could see movement inside, a figure, a woman, pounding on the driver's side window. The water was up to the door handles now, maybe higher. He had minutes at most before the vehicle went under completely. He dove forward, letting the current carry him toward the car, swimming hard to angle his approach. The rain hammered his head every time he surfaced for air. The darkness was absolute except for those failing taillights and the occasional flash of distant lightning that turned the world stark white for a heartbeat. His hand hit metal, the trunk of the car. Lucas pulled himself along the vehicle's length, fighting the current that wanted to drag him past it and downstream. The car lurched suddenly, the front end dipping lower as water flooded in through gaps in the seals. He heard another scream from inside, more desperate now. The driver's side window was closed, but Lucas could see her clearly now. A woman, maybe mid-30s, dark hair plastered to her face, eyes wide with terror. The water inside the car was already up to her chest. She was pounding on the window with both fists, her mouth open in a scream he could barely hear. Lucas grabbed the door handle and pulled, knowing it was futile but trying anyway. Locked, or jammed, or both. The water pressure would make it impossible to open regardless. He hammered his fist against the window, shouting, "Cover your face!" She didn't seem to understand at first, panic making her movements jerky and uncoordinated. Lucas held up his elbow, miming the action. Finally, she seemed to get it, turning away and bringing her arms up to shield her head. He needed something to break the window, but there was nothing. No rock, no tool, just water and darkness and time running out. The car dipped again, the hood now completely submerged. In another minute, maybe two, the whole vehicle would sink and she'd be trapped inside. Lucas made a decision born of desperation. He pulled back his arm and drove his elbow into the window with every ounce of strength he had. Pain exploded through his arm, white-hot and electric, but the window held. He hit it again. On the fourth strike, a crack appeared. On the fifth, the glass shattered inward. Water immediately began pouring into the car through the opening, accelerating the sinking, but it also equalized the pressure. Lucas reached through, ignoring the shards of glass that sliced his forearm, and found the unlock button. The door opened with resistance, water gushing out even as more flooded in. The woman lunged toward him, her hands scrabbling for purchase on his shoulders, his arms, anything. She was coughing, choking, her movements weak and uncoordinated. Lucas got an arm around her waist and pulled her free of the car just as the vehicle gave a final lurch and began sliding toward the deeper channel. "I've got you," he gasped, his own voice barely audible over the roar of water and storm. "I've got you. Just hold on." She wrapped her arms around his neck in a death grip, her weight dragging them both under for a moment. Lucas kicked hard, breaking the surface, gulping air that was more rain than oxygen. The current had them now, pulling them away from where the car had been, away from the shore. He fought against it, angling across the current rather than trying to swim directly against it, a technique he'd learned as a teenager when this river had been a place for swimming rather than drowning. His muscles burned. His lungs felt like they were on fire. The woman's grip around his neck was so tight he could barely breathe, but he understood. She was drowning, had been drowning, and instinct made her hold on with everything she had. "Let me swim," he choked out. "Too tight." She loosened her grip just enough. Lucas kicked harder, pulling them toward the shore with strokes that grew weaker with each passing second. The cold was seeping into his core now, making his movements sluggish. His injured arm was leaving a dark trail in the water that he tried not to think about. Time became elastic, stretching into an eternity where there was nothing but cold water, burning muscles, and the woman's gasping breaths in his ear. He wasn't sure if they were making progress or just being swept downstream. The darkness was too complete, the rain too heavy to tell. Then his foot hit something. Mud, blessed mud. Lucas found the river bottom and got his legs under him, half carrying, half dragging the woman toward the shore. They collapsed together in the shallows, both gasping, coughing up river water. For a long moment, Lucas could only lie there in 6 inches of water and muddy reeds, his chest heaving, every muscle in his body screaming. The rain continued to pour down, but he was so cold and wet already that it barely registered. Beside him, the woman was coughing violently, retching up water. Lucas forced himself onto his hands and knees, then to his feet, swaying dangerously. He reached down and helped her up, supporting most of her weight as they stumbled up the slight incline toward the road. A semi-truck had stopped on the shoulder, its hazard lights flashing, and the driver was climbing down from the cab, a flashlight in his hand. "Jesus Christ!" the driver shouted, running toward them. "I saw the whole thing. Are you insane? Are you all right?" "Call 911, Lucas managed, his teeth chattering so hard he could barely form words. "She needs an ambulance." The truck driver was already pulling out his phone, but he shrugged off his jacket and draped it over the woman's shoulders. In the glow of the truck's lights and the flashlight beam, Lucas got his first clear look at the person he'd just pulled from the river. She was younger than he'd thought, mid-30s maybe, with shoulder-length dark hair now hanging in tangled ropes around her face. Her clothes were torn and muddy. There was a cut above her left eyebrow, bleeding slowly, mixing with the rain running down her face. She was shivering violently, her lips tinged blue, her skin pale as death. But it was her eyes that stopped him. Hazel eyes, flecked with gold, set in a face that was somehow familiar despite being bruised and half hidden by wet hair. Something about the shape of her jaw, the way her nose curved slightly to the left from an old break. "The ambulance is coming," the truck driver was saying. 10 minutes, they said. "Jesus, buddy, that was the bravest damn thing I've ever seen. You saved her life." Lucas barely heard him. He was staring at the woman, trying to place why she looked familiar, why his heart was suddenly racing for reasons that had nothing to do with the rescue or the cold. The woman was looking at him too, her hazel eyes focusing slowly, as if she was having trouble seeing him clearly. She opened her mouth, coughed, tried again. When she spoke, her voice was hoarse, barely above a whisper, but every word was clear. "Lucas? Lucas Reed?" The world stopped. Everything, the rain, the truck driver's voice, the distant wail of approaching sirens, all of it faded into white noise. Lucas stood frozen, the cold forgotten, staring at this stranger who knew his name. "How—" His voice came out strangled, broken. "How do you know my name?" The woman's eyes filled with tears that had nothing to do with the river water. She reached up with a shaking hand, pushing the wet hair back from her face, and Lucas felt his heart stop completely. Because now he could see her clearly. Now he could see the small scar under her chin, the one from a childhood bicycle accident. The way her left eyebrow had a tiny gap in it where hair didn't grow. The exact shape of her lips, the way her ears curved, the tiny mole on her neck that he used to kiss every morning. No, it wasn't possible. It couldn't be possible. "Lucas," she whispered again, and her voice, God, her voice, was one he'd heard in his dreams every night for 3 years, one he'd thought he'd never hear again except in memory. The truck driver was saying something, asking if they knew each other, if everything was all right, but Lucas couldn't respond. His legs felt weak. His vision was tunneling. He opened his mouth, but no words came out. The woman took a step toward him, stumbling, and he instinctively reached out to steady her. The moment his hands touched her arms, the moment he felt the solid reality of her beneath his fingers, something inside him broke. "It's me," she said, tears streaming down her face now, mixing with the rain. "Lucas, it's me. It's Emily." Lucas Reed had been a tow truck driver for 15 years. He'd seen accidents that would haunt most people for life. He'd pulled bodies from wreckage, had delivered death notifications to grieving families, had stood at gravesides and wondered how life could be so randomly cruel. He'd thought he'd seen everything, thought nothing could surprise him anymore. But this was impossible. "No," he heard himself say, the word torn from somewhere deep inside. "No, you're not. You can't be." Because Emily Reed, his wife, the mother of his son, the woman he'd loved since he was 23 years old, Emily was dead. He'd identified her body at the morgue 3 years ago. He'd stood at her graveside while they lowered the casket into the ground. He'd held their son while Ben screamed for his mommy who would never come home again. He'd signed death certificates and met with lawyers and spent 1,000 sleepless nights wishing he could have saved her, wishing he'd been there, wishing he could trade places with her. Dead people didn't come back. Dead people didn't climb out of rivers. Dead people didn't say your name with tears in their eyes. "I know," Emily said, and her voice cracked on the words. "I know what you think, what you've been told. Lucas, I know what you've been through because of me, and I'm so sorry. But I swear to you, I swear on everything, It's really me. The truck driver's flashlight wavered between them, his confusion evident. Wait, what's going on? You two know each other? Lady, do you need medical attention? You're not making sense. Shut up! Lucas roared, his voice raw and savage, and the truck driver took a step back, hands raised. Lucas turned back to the woman, to Emily, to this impossible thing standing in front of him, and felt his world tilting sideways. She had Emily's eyes, Emily's scar, Emily's voice. The way she stood with her weight on her left leg because an old injury made her right knee ache when she was tired. The way she twisted her wedding ring when she was nervous. Except, he looked down. There was no ring there now, just a pale band of skin where one used to be. How? He managed to force out. How is this possible? I buried you. Emily died. Emily's gone. I didn't die, she said, and she took another step closer, close enough now that he could feel the heat coming off her body despite the cold. The crash. The hit and run. I didn't die, Lucas. Someone pulled me out. Someone made it look like I died. They had to make everyone think I was dead, including you, especially you, because... Stop. Lucas put his hands over his ears like a child trying to block out something too terrible to hear. Stop. 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 This isn't real. You're not real. This is... I'm in shock. Hypothermia. I'm hallucinating. Emily reached out and grabbed his wrists, pulling his hands away from his ears. Her grip was strong, her hands cold but solid and real. You're not hallucinating, she said fiercely. Lucas, look at me. Really, look at me. He did. God help him. He looked. And the longer he looked, the more impossible things he saw. Not just the physical features he'd memorized over 12 years of marriage, but something deeper. The way she tilted her head slightly when she was trying to make a point. The way her eyes showed every emotion she felt because she'd never been good at hiding them. The tiny crease between her eyebrows that appeared when she was worried. Remember the night Ben was born? Emily said urgently. The snowstorm, the hospital 20 miles away, and you drove like a madman through the blizzard? Remember what you said to me when they put him in your arms for the first time? Lucas felt tears burning in his eyes. No one else knows that, he whispered. You said, I didn't know I could love anything this much until right now. Emily continued, her own tears falling freely now. And I said, that's how I felt when I met you. And you kissed my forehead and told me you'd protect us both forever, no matter what. Stop, Lucas said again, but this time it came out as a sob. Remember our first apartment, the one with the leaky ceiling? You put a pot under the drip in the bedroom, and you said it was like sleeping next to a drum. Remember our honeymoon in that terrible motel in Atlantic City where the air conditioning broke and we spent the whole weekend sweating and laughing? Remember when you proposed? You were so nervous you dropped the ring and it rolled under the restaurant table, and the waiter had to help you find it? Emily, the name was a prayer and a curse and a question all at once. Remember 3 years ago, the morning of the accident? You made me breakfast, burnt toast because you were running late, and I kissed you goodbye at the door, and I said, God, Lucas, I said I'd see you tonight. I promised I'd be home. Lucas's legs gave out. He didn't fall so much as collapse, his knees hitting the muddy ground hard enough to hurt. The rain poured down on his bowed head, and he couldn't tell any more what was rain and what were tears. Emily dropped down in front of him, her hands on his face, forcing him to look at her. I'm so sorry, she sobbed. I'm so sorry for what they did to you, for what I had to let happen. But I'm here now. I'm alive. I'm real. This isn't happening, Lucas said, but even as he said it, he was reaching up to touch her face, his fingers trembling as they traced the familiar contours, the high cheekbones, the slightly crooked nose, the scar under her chin. This can't be happening. It is, Emily said. I'm here. I'm really here. In the distance, sirens wailed louder, growing closer. Red and blue lights began to paint the trees, reflecting off the wet pavement. The truck driver was flagging down the emergency vehicles, his voice carrying back to them. Over here. They need help, Ed. But Lucas barely registered any of it. His world had shrunk to the woman kneeling in front of him, the impossible woman with his dead wife's face, her voice, her eyes, her memories, the woman who couldn't exist but did. "I thought you were gone," he whispered, and his voice broke completely on the last word. "I thought I'd lost you forever. Do you know what that did to me? To Ben? He cried for you every night for months. He still... God, Emily, he still sleeps with your old sweatshirt because it used to smell like you." Emily's face crumpled. "Ben," she breathed. "Oh God, Ben. My baby. Is he... How is he?" "He's 7 now," Lucas said, and fresh tears spilled down his cheeks. 7 years old, and he barely remembers you. I show him pictures, I tell him stories, but you're becoming a fairy tale to him. A ghost. How is he supposed to understand that his mother came back from the dead? Lucas, how is any of this possible? His voice rose, edged with hysteria now. People don't just come back. Dead wives don't climb out of rivers. This is insane. Paramedics were running toward them now, carrying equipment, their boots splashing through puddles. A police cruiser pulled up behind the ambulance, its lights adding to the chaos of colors painting the night. "Sir, ma'am, we need to check you both over," one of the paramedics said, kneeling beside them. "You've been in the water? Possible hypothermia? Injuries?" "Tell them," Lucas said, his eyes locked on Emily's face. "Tell them who you are. Tell them you're Emily Reed, that you died 3 years ago in a hit-and-run accident. Tell them you were buried in Riverside Cemetery, plot 247, next to where my mother is buried and where I'm supposed to be buried when my time comes. Tell them!" Emily looked up at the paramedic, at the gathering circle of first responders, at the truck driver who'd witnessed Lucas's impossible rescue. When she spoke, her voice was steady despite the tears. "My name is Emily Reed," she said clearly, "and 3 years ago I was told that if I ever spoke that name again, if I ever tried to contact my family, they would be killed." The paramedic blinked. "Ma'am, you're in shock. Let's get you warmed up and—" "I'm not in shock," Emily said. "I'm in danger, and now because I've been found, so is everyone around me." Lucas stared at her. "What are you talking about?" Emily looked back at him, and for the first time he saw something beyond grief and relief in her eyes. He saw fear. "The accident 3 years ago wasn't an accident," she said. "It was an attempt on my life. And when it failed, when I survived, they made a choice. They could kill me, or they could use me. They chose to use me. They faked my death, gave me a new identity, and put me to work. And now—" "Ma'am, you need immediate medical attention," the paramedic interrupted, more firmly this time. "You're not making sense. You're clearly disoriented." "And now they've found me again," Emily continued, ignoring the paramedic, her eyes locked on Lucas's. "That crash tonight, it wasn't an accident either. They ran me off the road. They're trying to kill me for real this time." "Who?" Lucas demanded. "Who's trying to kill you?" Before Emily could answer, one of the police officers who'd been checking the scene jogged back toward them, his radio crackling. "We need everyone to clear the area," he said urgently. "There's another vehicle about a quarter-mile north on the shoulder. No one inside, but the engine's still warm and there's damage consistent with a collision. Dispatch is sending backup." Emily's face went white. "They're still here," she whispered. "Lucas, they're still here. They're going to try again." "Okay, that's enough," the paramedic said, gesturing to his partner. "She's clearly confused, possibly concussed. Let's get them both loaded up into the hospital." "I'm not confused." Emily's voice cracked like a whip, sharp and desperate. She grabbed Lucas's hand, squeezed it hard. "Lucas, listen to me. 3 years ago, I was working at Brennan and Associates, remember? The law firm downtown?" Lucas nodded numbly. "You were a paralegal. Corporate law." "That's what I told everyone," Emily said. "But I was also investigating them. The senior partners, Brennan, Mitchell, Hardwick, they were running a massive embezzlement scheme, funneling money from client accounts to offshore holdings. I found proof. I was going to the authorities. And then—" "The hit and run," Lucas finished, his mind reeling. "I never made it to the FBI," Emily said. "But someone else did. Someone from the Attorney General's office who'd been investigating the same thing." He found me in the hospital, barely alive. He told me the people I'd been planning to expose had resources, connections, the ability to make witnesses disappear. He said if I testified openly, I'd be dead within a week, and probably you and Ben too. So they made a deal. I'd go into witness protection, help them build a case from the shadows, and in exchange, you'd be safe. They'd think I was dead and leave you alone. A police officer had moved closer, listening now. Ma'am, these are serious allegations. If you're saying you're in witness protection, Emily corrected. I was in witness protection, but something went wrong. Someone leaked information. They found out I was still alive, found out where I was being kept. Tonight was supposed to look like an accident, just like last time, another tragic death of a woman no one would miss. She looked at Lucas, her eyes pleading for him to believe her, to understand. But then you showed up. You saved me. Again. And now? A sharp crack split the night, the unmistakable sound of a gunshot. Everyone hit the ground instinctively. Lucas covered Emily with his body, his mind struggling to process what was happening. Another shot rang out, and one of the ambulance's windows exploded in a spray of safety glass. "Everyone down!" one of the police officers shouted, drawing his weapon. "Active shooter! Get behind the vehicles!" Chaos erupted. The paramedics scrambled for cover. The truck driver ran for his rig. The police officers took defensive positions, their radios crackling with urgent calls for backup. Lucas grabbed Emily's hand and pulled her toward his pickup truck, which was still parked where he'd left it 20 yards up the road. They ran in a crouch, slipping in the mud, as another shot kicked up dirt inches from Lucas's foot. They made it to the truck and threw themselves behind it, pressing their backs against the cold metal. Lucas's heart was hammering so hard he thought it might burst from his chest. "Are you hit?" he gasped, running his hands over Emily, checking for blood. No, I'm okay," she panted. "Lucas, I told you, they're here. They won't stop. They can't let me live, not now, not after." "Where's it coming from?" Lucas interrupted, his mind shifting into survival mode. He might not understand what was happening, might not believe half of what Emily had told him, but bullets were real and someone was shooting at them. "The trees," Emily said, pointing across the road to the thick forest that lined the opposite side. "Probably elevated, using a night scope." Another shot hit the truck's hood, and Lucas and Emily both flinched. The police were returning fire now, their muzzle flashes bright in the darkness, but they were shooting blind, trying to suppress fire from a shooter they couldn't see. "We need to move," Lucas said. "We're sitting ducks here." "Where?" Emily demanded. "That's open road in both directions. We'd be exposed." Lucas was already moving, crawling toward the driver's door. "When I say go, you get in the passenger side. Stay low. Can you do that?" Emily nodded, her face set with determination that he remembered from 1,000 domestic arguments, from the time she'd insisted on learning to change her own oil, from the day she'd demanded to be in the delivery room despite the complications. His Emily. Practical, stubborn, brave Emily. Except she wasn't dead. She was here, alive, being shot at, and nothing made sense anymore. "Go!" Lucas yanked open the driver's door, using it as a shield, and Emily scrambled around the front of the truck to the passenger side. Another shot pinged off metal somewhere behind them. Lucas threw himself into the cab, key already in hand from his pocket, and jammed it into the ignition. The engine roared to life, a sound he'd never been so grateful to hear. Emily tumbled into the passenger seat, slamming the door, and Lucas was already moving, the truck lurching forward as he floored the accelerator. "Sir, wait!" One of the police officers was shouting, but his voice was lost in the squeal of tires and the roar of the engine. Lucas drove like he was trying to outrun the end of the world, the truck fishtailing on the wet road before the tires caught and hurled them forward. The speedometer climbed, 40, 50, 60 miles per hour, the road barely visible through the rain-hammered windshield. "There's a bullet hole in your windshield," Emily said, her voice unnaturally calm. Lucas glanced at the spiderweb crack in the glass, centered perfectly where his head would have been if they'd stayed stationary another 5 seconds. "Yeah," he said, "I see it." He took a curve too fast, the truck sliding sideways before he corrected, and Emily braced herself against the dashboard. "Where are we going?" "I don't know," Lucas admitted. Away, somewhere safe, somewhere I can think. They'll follow us, Emily said. Lucas, they'll… I know. The words came out sharper than he'd intended. He took a breath, trying to steady himself. I know, but right now I need you to tell me everything. No more pieces, no more mysterious hints. Everything. Starting with why you're not actually dead. Emily was silent for a long moment, staring out at the rain-soaked darkness rushing past the window. When she finally spoke, her voice was quiet but steady. Remember I told you about the corruption ring at the firm? Yeah. It was bigger than I thought. It wasn't just embezzlement. They were laundering money for a drug trafficking operation, facilitating illegal arms deals, helping criminals hide assets. We're talking hundreds of millions of dollars, Lucas, maybe more. The senior partners at Brennan and Associates were essentially running a criminal enterprise disguised as a legitimate law firm. Lucas's hands tightened on the steering wheel. And you found out. I found out, Emily confirmed. I was organizing files for a case, boring routine work, and I noticed discrepancies, money moving in ways that didn't make sense. I started digging, careful at first, but the more I found, the more horrified I became. These were our clients, Lucas. People we'd had to our house for dinner parties, upstanding members of the community, and underneath it all, they were monsters. So you were going to report them. I compiled evidence, Emily said. Bank records, emails, internal memos that laid out the whole operation. I contacted the FBI, set up a meeting for a Thursday afternoon, but the accident happened on Wednesday night. They found out you were going to talk. They must have. I don't know how. Maybe they had someone in the FBI office, or maybe they were monitoring my communications, but they knew, and they sent someone to kill me. Lucas remembered that night with perfect, terrible clarity. He'd been home with Ben, making dinner when the police officers knocked on the door. They'd been professional but kind, using phrases like terrible accident and did everything they could. And would you be able to come identify the body? He remembered the morgue's fluorescent lights, too bright and too cold. He remembered the sheet being pulled back from her face, her beautiful face, so still and pale, a gash across her forehead, her lips slightly parted, as if she'd been about to say something important. I saw you, he said roughly, at the morgue. They pulled back the sheet and I saw your face. I touched your hand. You were cold. Dead. How? That wasn't me, Emily said softly. I don't know who it was. Maybe someone they killed to take my place, someone who looked enough like me after the damage from the crash. The federal agent who found me, Marshall Garrett, he arranged everything. He said it had to be completely convincing or the people who wanted me dead would come after my family to be sure. Jesus Christ. Lucas felt sick. Some other woman died and everyone thought she was you? I know how it sounds. I know how wrong it is. But Lucas, I was barely conscious when they made the decision. I woke up in a government facility 3 days later, and they told me I was dead, that there'd been a funeral, that you'd buried me. They said if I ever contacted you or Ben, if I ever revealed I was alive, you'd both be killed. What was I supposed to do? I don't know, Lucas's voice cracked. I don't know, Emily, but for 3 years, I mourned you. Ben mourned you. We fell apart without you. I had to explain to our 6-year-old son why his mommy was never coming home. Do you have any idea what that's like? Yes, Emily shouted back, and there were tears streaming down her face again. Yes, I do, because I had to live knowing you were both out there without me, knowing Ben was growing up without his mother, knowing you were alone, struggling, hurting, and I couldn't do anything about it. Every day for 3 years, Lucas. Every single day I wanted to come home. I wanted to see you both so badly it felt like dying. But they said if I did, you'd die for real. So I stayed dead. I testified in secret. I helped them build their case. I did everything they asked because I thought it was keeping you safe. Lucas drove in silence, processing this, trying to reconcile the impossible facts with his understanding of reality. Finally, he asked, so what changed? Why are they trying to kill you now? The case went to trial 6 months ago, Emily said, wiping at her eyes. All 3 senior partners were convicted, along with a dozen of their associates. I thought it was over. I thought maybe, finally, I could come home. But then Marshal Garrett contacted me 3 weeks ago. He said there were complications, that some of the convicted men were talking about cutting deals, about revealing additional information that could implicate people even higher up the chain. Federal judges, state legislators, people with real power. And somehow word leaked that the prosecution's star witness was still alive. You. Me. Garrett said I needed to be moved to a new location, given a new identity. Again. He said it wasn't safe anymore. But She stopped, her voice catching. I couldn't do it again, Lucas. I couldn't disappear into another life, another name, spend another 3 years or 5 years or forever being someone else. I told him I wanted out. I wanted to come home. And he said no. He said it was impossible, that the threats were real, that if I left protection, I was signing my own death warrant. Emily laughed bitterly. Turns out he was right. I left the safe house 2 days ago. They found me tonight. Lucas took another turn too fast, the truck's tires squealing in protest. His mind was racing, trying to find some anchor point of logic in this insanity. Okay, he said finally. Okay, first priority, we need to get somewhere safe. Somewhere they can't find us. There is nowhere safe, Emily said. Lucas, these people have resources. Federal contracts, connections to law enforcement, access to databases. My sister's place, Lucas interrupted. Beth's house. It's off the grid, no internet, no phone line. She bought it last year as a retirement property. No one knows about it except family. That's where Ben is? Emily's voice softened on their son's name. Yeah, he's there with Beth for the week while I work. It's about 40 minutes north up in the hills near Coopersville. Then that's where they'll look. Not if we're smart about it. Lucas was already planning, his mind working through the logistics. We ditch my truck. It's probably got a bullet or 2 in it, and the police will be looking for it. We take back roads, avoid traffic cameras, change our appearance as much as we can. We get to Beth's, grab Ben, and then we figure out our next move. What next move? Emily demanded. Lucas, you don't understand the kind of people we're dealing with. They don't just give up. They won't stop until what? Until you're dead? Until I'm dead? Until Ben's an orphan? Lucas's voice was steel now. No, absolutely not. You came back from the dead, Emily. You survived once. We'll survive again. This is insane. Yeah, Lucas agreed. It really is. But I'm not losing you twice. Not happening. So you'd better tell me everything you know about these people, because we're going to need every advantage we can get. Emily stared at him for a long moment, and he could see her wrestling with something. Fear, maybe, or guilt, or the simple shock of being alive and found and in danger all at the same time. Finally, she nodded. Okay, she said. Okay. The organization is called the Syndicate. At least that's what Garrett called it. It's not just the law firm. That was one operation in a network that spans multiple states. They traffic drugs, mostly, but also weapons, people, whatever makes money. The firm was their way of legitimizing their income, of integrating with legitimate society. Who runs it? I don't know all the names. The people convicted were middle management, basically. The real power, the people at the top, they stayed insulated. But some of them are starting to be exposed now because of the testimony at trial. That's why they want me dead. Without me, the cases start falling apart. So we go to the authorities. FBI, state police, whoever. No. Emily grabbed his arm, her grip urgent. Lucas, no. We can't trust anyone official. That's how they found me the first time. Someone in law enforcement tipped them off. Garrett suspected it was someone in the marshal's office itself, maybe multiple someones. These people have spent decades building connections. We can't know who's compromised. Then what? Lucas was trying not to panic, trying to stay focused. We can't just run forever. I don't know, Emily admitted. I don't know. I just know that 3 years ago they tried to kill me and I survived. Tonight they tried again and I survived. Maybe I'm not supposed to die. Maybe I'm supposed to fight. Lucas glanced at her, this impossible woman beside him, and saw not the corpse he'd mourned but someone fiercer, harder, tempered by 3 years of living in fear and isolation. The Emily he'd known had been brave, yes, but in simple ways, brave enough to speak her mind, to stand up to injustice, to protect her family. This Emily had survived an assassination attempt, had lived in the shadows, had endured unimaginable loss and kept going anyway. She was a survivor, a fighter. His wife. "Okay," he said, "then we fight. But first, we stay alive, and we get to Ben." Emily nodded, her jaw set. "And we get to Ben." They drove on into the night, the rain finally beginning to ease, leaving only a cold drizzle that the wipers could actually manage. Behind them, somewhere in the darkness, people were hunting them, people with guns and resources and no regard for innocent life. But Lucas had something they didn't. He had everything to lose, which meant he had no limits on how far he'd go to protect it. And Emily had already died once and come back. Whatever came next, they'd face it together. The road stretched ahead, dark and uncertain, leading them toward Beth's house in the hills, toward their son, toward a reckoning that had been 3 years in the making. Lucas pressed the accelerator down harder, and the truck responded, carrying them forward into the unknown. "There's one more thing," Emily said quietly. "What?" "Before they tried to kill me tonight, before they ran me off the road, I got a message, a text from a number I didn't recognize." "What did it say?" Emily pulled out her phone, the screen cracked but still functioning, and showed him. In the glow of the display, Lucas read 3 words that made his blood run cold. "We have Ben." His foot slammed on the brake so hard they both jerked forward against their seatbelts. The truck slewed sideways, coming to a shuddering stop in the middle of the empty road. "What?" The word came out barely above a whisper. "That came through 20 minutes before the crash," Emily said, her voice shaking now. "I thought it was a bluff, a trick to flush me out. But Lucas, what if it's not? What if they really have him?" Lucas was already calling Beth's number, his hands trembling so badly he almost dropped the phone. It rang once, twice, 3 times. Come on, pick up." 4 rings, 5, then voicemail. "Hey, this is Beth. Leave a message." He tried again, same result. He tried the house's landline, or rather, he tried to remember if Beth even had a landline. She did, didn't she? He punched in the number from memory, praying he had it right. It rang, and no one answered. "Oh God," Lucas heard himself say. "Oh God, oh God." "Drive," Emily said urgently. "Lucas, drive. We need to get there now." He punched the accelerator, the truck leaping forward, and this time he didn't care about speed limits or caution or being smart about their approach. His son was in danger, might already be hurt, might already be... No. He couldn't think like that. Wouldn't. Ben was alive. He had to be alive. Because if Lucas had gotten Emily back only to lose Ben in the same night, it wouldn't be tragedy. It would be the universe's idea of a cruel joke, and Lucas would burn the whole world down to make it right. The 40-minute drive to Beth's house took Lucas 23 minutes, and he barely remembered any of it. The truck hurtled through the darkness like a missile, taking curves that should have been taken at 30 miles per hour at twice that speed, the tires screaming in protest. Emily braced herself against the dashboard, her knuckles white, but she didn't tell him to slow down. She understood. Their son was in danger, and every second counted. Lucas tried Beth's number 4 more times during the drive. Each time it went straight to voicemail. The house line rang endlessly with no answer. His mind conjured terrible scenarios. Beth tied up, unconscious, or worse. Ben crying out for help that wouldn't come. Armed men in dark clothes ransacking his sister's quiet little house in the hills. "Maybe the cell service is just bad up there," Emily said, but her voice lacked conviction. "Beth could be asleep, could have her phone off. At 11:30 on a Wednesday night? With a 7-year-old in the house?" Lucas shook his head. "Beth sleeps like a cat. Lightest sleeper I know. She'd hear the phone. Then maybe they're outside. Maybe Ben wanted to look at stars and Beth took him out to the back field where there's no light pollution. You know how she is about educational moments." Lucas wanted to believe that. God, he wanted to believe that his son was safe, looking up at the stars with his aunt, completely oblivious to the nightmare unfolding around them. But the text message on Emily's phone burned in his mind. "We have Ben." 3 words, simple and devastating. How would they even know about Ben? Lucas asked suddenly. How would they know to use him as leverage? Emily was quiet for a moment. "I don't know," she admitted. "I never mentioned him during any of my testimony. I never gave them your names, never said where you lived. Marshal Garrett promised me that part of my file was sealed, classified, known only to him and maybe 2 other people. Then someone talked. Someone told them. Or they figured it out on their own. Lucas, these people, they have resources. Private investigators, hackers, access to government databases. If they wanted to find out who Emily Reed was before she disappeared, it wouldn't be that hard. Birth records, marriage license, Ben's birth certificate. It's all public record if you know where to look." Lucas's hands tightened on the steering wheel until his knuckles ached. "If they hurt him, they won't." Emily's voice was fierce. "They won't hurt him, Lucas. He's leverage. He's only valuable to them if he's alive and unharmed. They're using him to draw us out, to make us do something stupid." "Like driving straight to Beth's house?" "Like driving straight to Beth's house," Emily confirmed grimly, "which is exactly what we're doing, which means they'll be waiting for us. I don't care. I know you don't. I don't either. But we need to be smart about this. We can't just rush in blind." "Watch me." Emily grabbed his arm. "Lucas, listen to me. These people don't make empty threats, but they also don't waste assets. If they have Ben, they'll keep him alive because they need something from us. Probably me specifically. They want me dead, yes, but they also want me to suffer first. That means we have time. Not much, but some." "Time for what?" "Time to plan. Time to figure out what we're walking into." Emily pulled out her damaged phone again, squinting at the cracked screen. "Is there anywhere near Beth's house where we can stop and survey the situation? Somewhere with a vantage point?" Lucas thought frantically. Beth's property was 5 acres of mostly wooded land at the end of a long dirt road. The house itself set back about a quarter mile from the main highway. The nearest neighbor was 2 miles away. It was private, isolated, perfect for someone who wanted peace and quiet in their retirement. Perfect also for an ambush. "There's an old logging road about half a mile before Beth's turnoff," he said. "It runs parallel to her property line through the woods. We could park there, approach on foot, see what we're dealing with before they know we're there." "That's good. That's smart," Emily nodded. "Do you have any weapons? Anything we could use?" "I've got a tire iron in the truck bed and a flashlight. That's it." "Better than nothing." Emily checked her phone again, then made a frustrated sound. "No signal. We're too far out." "There's no cell service at Beth's place. That's part of why she bought it. She wanted to disconnect from the world. No internet, no phone, just her and her books and her garden. That's not going to help us." "No," Lucas agreed. "It's not." They drove in tense silence for another few minutes, the road narrowing as they left the main highway behind. The rain had stopped completely now, leaving the night cold and clear. Through the windshield, Lucas could see stars, thousands of them, brilliant against the black sky. On any other night, he would have found it beautiful. Tonight, it just meant better visibility for whoever might be watching. The logging road appeared on their right, almost invisible except for the gap in the trees that marked its entrance. Lucas killed the headlights and turned onto it, the truck bouncing over ruts and exposed roots. He drove slowly now, careful to make as little noise as possible until they were about 50 yards in. Then he stopped, put the truck in park and turned off the engine. The sudden silence was deafening. "Okay," Lucas said quietly. "We go on foot from here. Stay close. Stay quiet. If you see or hear anything—" "I know," Emily interrupted. "I've been living in fear for 3 years, Lucas. I know how to stay alert." He looked at her in the darkness, this woman who was and wasn't his wife, who'd survived death and lived to tell about it. "I'm sorry," he said. "I'm sorry for what you've been through. I'm sorry I wasn't there to protect you. You were protecting Ben. That's what mattered." Emily reached out and touched his face, her fingers cold against his cheek. "And now we protect him together." They got out of the truck as quietly as they could, easing the doors shut rather than slamming them. Lucas retrieved the tire iron from the truck bed, heavy, solid, capable of breaking bones if swung with enough force. It wasn't much, but it made him feel slightly less helpless. The woods were thick here, the ground covered in decades of fallen leaves and pine needles that muffled their footsteps. Lucas led the way, moving carefully between trees, Emily close behind him. The temperature had dropped significantly since the rain stopped, and their breath misted in the cold air. Lucas was still wet from the river, his clothes stiff and uncomfortable, but adrenaline kept him from feeling the cold. They'd been walking for maybe 10 minutes when Lucas saw light through the trees ahead, the warm glow of windows, electric light spilling out into the darkness. Beth's house. They crept closer, staying low, until they reached the edge of the tree line where Beth's property opened up into the cleared area around the house. The house itself looked normal, peaceful even. It was a modest two-story structure with a wraparound porch painted white with blue shutters. Beth's car, a sensible Honda sedan, was parked in the driveway. The porch light was on, and lights glowed in several windows. Nothing looked out of place. "I don't see any other vehicles," Emily whispered. "No cars, no vans." "They could have parked on the main road and walked in," Lucas said. "Or they could be inside already. Or the text was a bluff and Ben's fine and we're panicking for nothing." Lucas wanted to believe that, but something felt wrong. He couldn't articulate what it was. Maybe the way the curtains were drawn when Beth usually left them open, or the fact that no one had answered multiple phone calls, or just the primal instinct that screamed danger. Whatever it was, every nerve in his body was firing warning signals. "I'm going in," he decided. "You stay here." "Absolutely not," Emily's voice was firm. "We go together or not at all." "Emily, don't Emily me. That's my son too. I've missed 3 years of his life, Lucas. 3 years. I'm not missing another second because you think I need protecting." Lucas wanted to argue, wanted to insist that she stay safe while he checked things out, but he recognized the set of her jaw, the fire in her eyes. This was the woman who'd stood up to corporate criminals, who'd survived an assassination attempt, who'd endured 3 years of hell to keep her family safe. She wasn't going to hide in the woods while their son might be in danger. "Fine," he said. "But we're careful. We check the perimeter first, look in windows, see if we can figure out what's happening inside before we commit to anything." They moved along the tree line, circling the house, staying in the shadows. The ground floor windows showed normal domestic scenes, the living room with its comfortable couch and Beth's extensive book collection, the kitchen with dishes drying in the rack by the sink. No signs of struggle, no indication anything was wrong. But there were also no signs of life, no movement, no sounds, nothing. They completed their circuit of the house, ending up near the back porch. From here, Lucas could see up to the second-floor windows. One of them, the guest room where Ben was staying, had a nightlight glowing softly. He could see the edge of the bed, the dinosaur posters Beth had put up to make Ben feel at home. "I can't tell if anyone's in there," Lucas muttered. "The angle's wrong. We need to get inside." Emily was already moving toward the back door, and Lucas hurried to catch up with her. The door was unlocked. That fact alone made Lucas's stomach clench with dread. Beth was careful about security, always had been, especially when she had Ben staying with her. She wouldn't leave the door unlocked at night, unless someone had forced their way in, unless she'd had no choice. Lucas pushed the door open slowly, the tire iron raised and ready. The kitchen was exactly as he'd seen it through the window, clean, ordinary, unthreatening. He stepped inside, Emily right behind him, both of them barely breathing. They moved through the kitchen into the hallway, every sense on high alert. The house was silent except for the soft hum of the refrigerator and the ticking of Beth's antique clock in the living room. Lucas checked each room as they passed. Living room empty, bathroom empty, Beth's study empty. The stairs to the second floor loomed ahead, each step a potential betrayal that would announce their presence. Lucas tested the first one carefully, found it solid and silent. He climbed slowly, Emily behind him, the tire iron slick in his sweaty palm. At the top of the stairs, the hallway stretched in both directions. Beth's master bedroom on the left, the guest room where Ben slept on the right. Lucas turned right, moving toward the soft glow of the nightlight. The door was ajar. Lucas pushed it open with his foot, ready for anything. An ambush? A gunman? His worst fears made manifest. What he found was Ben, asleep in bed, his small body curled under a Star Wars comforter, his dark hair messy on the pillow. Peaceful, unharmed, completely oblivious to the terror that had consumed his father for the past half hour. Lucas sagged against the doorframe, the relief so intense it made him dizzy. Emily pushed past him, moving to the bed, her hand reaching out to touch their son's face, as if she couldn't quite believe he was real. "He's okay," she breathed. "Oh God, Lucas, he's okay." But where's Beth? Lucas's relief was already giving way to new worry. If Ben was fine, if nothing seemed disturbed, then why hadn't Beth answered her phone? Where was she? A sound from downstairs, soft, barely audible. The creak of a floorboard. Lucas's head snapped toward the doorway. He held up a hand, signaling Emily to stay quiet, stay still. She froze, her hand hovering over Ben's sleeping form. Another sound. Footsteps, deliberate and careful, moving through the first floor. Someone was in the house. Lucas moved quickly but silently back into the hallway, the tire iron gripped tight. He could hear them more clearly now. Definitely footsteps. Definitely someone trying to move quietly but not quite succeeding. They were in the living room, moving toward the stairs. He positioned himself at the top of the staircase, ready to defend his family with whatever it took. His heart hammered in his chest. His mouth was dry. Every muscle was coiled tight, ready to spring. A shadow appeared at the bottom of the stairs. A figure began to climb, moving slowly, cautiously. Lucas raised the tire iron, prepared to swing the moment the intruder came into range. The figure reached the top step and Lucas swung with all his strength, only to have his arm caught mid-swing by a surprisingly strong grip. "Jesus Christ, Lucas, it's me!" Beth. It was Beth, her eyes wide with shock, staring at the tire iron that had stopped inches from her head. "Beth?" Lucas lowered the weapon, his hands shaking. "Where the hell were you? Why didn't you answer your phone?" "My phone?" Beth looked confused. "It's in my car. I must have left it there when I came back from the grocery store earlier. I was out in the garden checking on the—" She stopped, her eyes focusing on something behind Lucas. "Oh my God." Lucas turned. Emily had emerged from Ben's room, standing in the hallway light, her wet and torn clothes, her bruised face, her impossible presence. Beth went white. "No," she whispered. "No, this isn't... You can't be..." "Hi, Beth," Emily said softly. "I know this is a lot to process." "You're dead." Beth's voice was flat, shocked. "You're dead. I went to your funeral. I helped Lucas pick out your casket. You're dead." "I'm not," Emily said simply. "I'm sorry. I'm so sorry, but I'm not dead." Beth looked at Lucas, her expression desperate, seeking confirmation that she wasn't losing her mind. Lucas nodded slowly. "It's her," he said. "I know how it sounds, I know how impossible it is, but it's really her. She's alive. She's been alive this whole time." Beth sat down hard on the top step, as if her legs had suddenly stopped working. "I need," she said faintly, "to sit down. Actually, I'm sitting. I need a drink, a very large drink." "We don't have time," Lucas said. "Beth, listen to me. Emily's in danger. We're all in danger. People are after her, people who want her dead, and they might be on their way here right now." That seemed to penetrate Beth's shock. She looked up sharply. "What people? What are you talking about?" "It's complicated," Emily said. "But Lucas is right. We're not safe here. We need to move, need to get Ben somewhere they can't find us." "Who's they?" Beth demanded, some of her natural assertiveness returning. "And why should I trust anything you say? You let us think you were dead for 3 years. You let my brother suffer. Let your son grow up without a mother." "I didn't have a choice," Emily's voice cracked. "Don't you think I wanted to come home? Don't you think every single day was torture, knowing you were all here and I couldn't see you? They said if I contacted anyone from my old life, my family would be killed. What was I supposed to do?" "The truth," Beth said coldly. "You were supposed to tell us the truth. And get you all murdered? That's not a choice, Beth. That's a nightmare." "Stop." Lucas held up his hands. "Both of you, just stop. We can hash this out later. We can have all the arguments and explanations later, but right now we need to focus. Beth, did anyone come to the house tonight? Any visitors, any strange calls? Beth shook her head, still looking dazed. No, nothing. It's been completely quiet. Ben and I had dinner, watched a movie. I put him to bed around 9. Then I went out to check on the garden beds because I thought I heard an animal getting into them. That's where I was when you showed up and nearly brained me with a tire iron. Emily got a text message saying they had Ben, Lucas explained. That's why we came rushing up here. We thought it was a bluff, Beth said. Obviously. Or you got the timing wrong, or... She stopped. Wait, if they sent that message, if they know about Ben, then they know about me too. They know about this house. Yes, Emily said, which is why we need to leave, right now. Leave and go where? Beth stood up, crossing her arms. I don't know if you've noticed, but it's the middle of the night and we have a sleeping 7-year-old. We can't just grab him and run into the woods. We can and we will if we have to, Lucas said. Beth, I know this is insane. I know you have questions. God knows I have questions. But people shot at us tonight. Real bullets from real guns. And if they're willing to kill Emily, they won't hesitate to kill anyone who gets in their way. That includes you. That includes Ben. Beth's face hardened. Whatever shock she'd been feeling was giving way to the practical, protective instincts that made her such a good aunt. Fine, she said. Give me 5 minutes to pack some essentials. Clothes for Ben, first aid kit, whatever cash I have in the house. You two figure out where we're going, because I assume you don't have a plan. We'll figure it out, Lucas said. Fantastic. Beth pushed past them, heading for her bedroom. This is exactly how I wanted to spend my Wednesday night, fleeing mysterious assassins with my supposedly dead sister-in-law. Just fantastic. Emily and Lucas stood in the hallway, looking at each other in the dim light. Despite everything, the danger, the fear, the sheer impossibility of their situation, Lucas felt something loosen in his chest. Ben was safe. Emily was alive. His sister was taking charge with her usual efficiency. They were together, and that meant something. We should wake Ben, Emily said softly. He needs to know. I need to see him awake. I need him to know I'm here. Lucas nodded. Yeah, but Emily, he's not going to understand. He barely remembers you. In his mind, you're someone from photographs and stories. This is going to be traumatic. I know. Emily's voice was thick with unshed tears. I know it will be hard for him. But I can't. Lucas, I've waited 3 years. I've dreamed about this moment every single night. Please. How could he say no to that? How could he deny her this reunion? Deny Ben the mother who'd been stolen from him? They entered the bedroom together, approaching the bed where their son slept. He looked so small, so innocent, one arm flung over his head, his breathing deep and even. He'd lost the baby roundness in his face, Lucas noticed. His features were sharpening, becoming more defined. He was growing up, changing, becoming his own person day by day. Emily knelt beside the bed, her hand trembling as she reached out to touch Ben's shoulder. Ben? She whispered. Baby, can you wake up for me? Ben stirred, mumbling something incoherent. His eyes fluttered open, unfocused and confused. Dad? I'm here, buddy, Lucas said, moving to the other side of the bed. Someone wants to see you. Ben's gaze shifted to Emily, still foggy with sleep. He blinked, rubbed his eyes, looked again. For a long moment he just stared at her, his young face scrunched in concentration as if he was trying to solve a difficult puzzle. Then, slowly, recognition flickered across his features. Mommy? Emily let out a sob. Yes, baby, yes, it's Mommy. But you're dead. Ben's voice was matter-of-fact, the way children state obvious truths. You died in a car crash when I was 4. I know that's what everyone thought, Emily said, tears streaming down her face. And I'm so sorry about that. But I'm not dead, sweetheart. I'm right here. I'm real. You can touch me if you want, see? She took his hand and placed it against her cheek. Ben's eyes went wide. You're real, he breathed. You're really real. I'm really real. Where were you? The question was plaintive, confused. Why didn't you come home? That's a long story, baby, and I promise I'll tell you all of it. But right now we need to go on an adventure. Dad and Aunt Beth and I, we need to take you somewhere safe. Can you do that? Can you be brave for me? Ben looked at Lucas, seeking confirmation. Lucas nodded. It's true, buddy. We need to leave. It'll be fun, like camping. In the middle of the night? The best adventures happen in the middle of the night, Emily said, forcing a smile through her tears. Come on, let's get you dressed. They got Ben into warm clothes, jeans, a hoodie, his favorite sneakers with the lights in the heels. He moved through the process in a daze, still half asleep, still processing the impossible fact of his mother's presence. Lucas could see the questions building behind his eyes, the confusion and wonder and fear all mixing together. Beth reappeared with the backpack stuffed with supplies. I've got clothes, food, $300 in cash, and a first aid kit. I also grabbed my hunting rifle. It's not much, but it's better than a tire iron. You have a hunting rifle? Lucas stared at his sister. I live alone in the woods, Lucas. Of course I have a rifle. I'm not an idiot. Beth handed him the weapon, a bolt-action .308 with a scope. There's a box of ammunition in the bag, too. Do you remember how to use one of these? Dad taught us both. Yeah, I remember. Good. Now where are we going? That was the question, wasn't it? They couldn't stay at Beth's. They couldn't go to Lucas's apartment. Too obvious, too easy to find. Credit cards, traceable information. They needed somewhere off the grid, somewhere no one would think to look. The old Reed property, Lucas said suddenly. Dad's hunting cabin. Beth frowned. That place is practically falling apart. We haven't been up there in years. Exactly. No one knows about it except family. It's isolated, no neighbors, no paper trail connecting it to us anymore since Dad died. It's perfect. It's also 3 hours north, and we don't have 3 hours of darkness left, Beth pointed out. We'd be on the road in daylight, visible, easy to spot. Then we find somewhere to hole up for the day and travel at night, Emily suggested. Somewhere public enough that they can't make a move without witnesses. A diner, maybe, or a church. A church, Lucas repeated. That's actually not a bad idea. There's that big Catholic church in Millerville about an hour from here, St. Anthony's. They keep their doors open 24 hours for people who need sanctuary. We could stay there during the day, rest, figure out our next move. And if the people after Emily don't respect sanctuary, Beth asked dryly, then we improvise. But at least we'd be somewhere they can't just walk in and start shooting. Beth considered this, then nodded. Fine. But we take 2 vehicles, my car and your truck. If one of us gets stopped or spotted, the other can keep going with Ben. No, Emily said immediately. We don't split up. That's how they divide and conquer. We stay together, all of us, no matter what. Emily's right, Lucas agreed. We're stronger together. We take Beth's car. It's more reliable than my truck, and it doesn't have bullet holes in it. Beth drives, I ride shotgun with the rifle, Emily and Ben in the back. We take back roads as much as possible, keep moving, stay alert. This is insane, Beth muttered, but she was already heading for the stairs. Absolutely insane. They piled into Beth's Honda, Ben drowsy but awake in the back seat next to Emily, Lucas in front with the rifle across his lap, Beth behind the wheel. As they pulled out of the driveway, Lucas took one last look at his sister's peaceful house, wondering if they'd ever be able to come back, if this place would ever feel safe again. The road stretched ahead of them, dark and winding. Beth drove with her headlights on, maintaining a normal speed, trying not to attract attention. Ben had fallen asleep again, his head resting against Emily's shoulder, and Emily was staring down at him with an expression of such profound love and grief that Lucas had to look away. They'd been driving for maybe 20 minutes, taking the long route on country roads that barely saw any traffic, when Lucas spotted headlights in the side mirror. A vehicle behind them, maybe half a mile back, matching their speed. Beth, he said quietly, we've got company. Beth's eyes flicked to the rearview mirror. I see them. Could be nothing. Could be a local heading home. At 1 a.m. on a Wednesday? Some people work late shifts. Some people are insomniacs. Some people are just driving, Lucas. But Lucas noticed that Beth's hands had tightened on the steering wheel, that she was sitting up straighter, more alert. She saw the danger too, even if she didn't want to admit it. The vehicle behind them maintained its distance, not closing in, but not falling back either, just following, steady and patient. Emily, Lucas said, not taking his eyes off the mirror. Look behind us. Tell me if you recognize that vehicle. Emily turned carefully, trying not to disturb Ben. She studied the headlights for a long moment. It's too dark. I can't tell the make or model, but the spacing of the headlights, it's a large vehicle, SUV or truck. The kind of vehicle someone would use if they were hunting people? The kind of vehicle a lot of people own, Beth interjected. You're both being paranoid. Paranoia kept me alive for 3 years, Emily said. Lucas, what are our options? We could try to lose them, take some turns, see if they follow. Or we could confront them, Beth suggested. Pull over, let them pass, see what they do. With Ben in the car? Absolutely not. Then what? We just keep driving and hope they're friendly? Lucas thought fast. Up ahead, maybe 2 miles, the road forked. Left would take them toward Millerville and the church. Right would loop back toward the highway. If the vehicle behind them was just a random local, they'd likely go right. If they were being followed, the tail would stick with them no matter which way they turned. When we get to the fork, go left toward Millerville, Lucas instructed. Don't signal, don't slow down, just turn. Let's see what our friend back there does. Beth nodded. They drove on in tense silence, the distance to the fork shrinking. 500 yards, 300, 100. Beth turned left smoothly without signaling, her headlights sweeping across the dark fields on either side of the road. In the mirror, Lucas watched the vehicle behind them. It slowed slightly at the fork, as if the driver was considering options. Then it turned left, following them. That's not good, Beth said unnecessarily. No, Lucas agreed. It's not. The vehicle behind them started to accelerate, closing the distance between them. 400 yards, 300, 200. Beth, go faster. I'm already doing 50 on a road with a speed limit of 35. If I go much faster... Go faster! Beth pressed the accelerator and the Honda leaped forward. 60 miles per hour. 70. The vehicle behind them matched their speed, staying close. In the back seat, Ben stirred, woken by the acceleration. Dad? What's happening? It's okay, buddy, Lucas said, trying to keep his voice calm. We're playing a game. Stay down, okay? Stay down in your seat. Down, and Emily was already pulling Ben lower, shielding him with her body. In the faint light from the dashboard, Lucas could see her face, pale, determined, terrified. The pursuing vehicle surged closer, 100 yards, 50. Then its high beams flicked on, flooding Beth's car with blinding light. I can't see, Beth shouted, one hand coming up to shield her eyes. The car swerved slightly before she corrected. Turn! Take the next turn, any turn. A dirt road appeared on the right, barely visible. Beth cranked the wheel hard and they went flying off the pavement onto the rutted track. The car bounced violently, the suspension screaming in protest. Behind them, the pursuing vehicle overshot the turn, its brake lights flaring red in the darkness. But it was already reversing, already correcting. Where does this road go? Emily demanded. I don't know. Beth was fighting the wheel as the car bucked over rocks and potholes. I've never been down here before. The dirt road curved through woods, narrow and treacherous. Beth had to slow down or risk losing control completely. Behind them, the pursuing vehicle had made the turn and was gaining ground. Then the woods opened up and they were in a clearing. An old farm, long abandoned, the skeleton of a barn listing dangerously to one side. The road ended at a fence line. Dead end. Beth, I see it! Beth spun the wheel, sending the car into a sliding turn that threw them all against their seatbelts. They rocketed back the way they'd come, directly toward the pursuing vehicle. For a heart-stopping moment, Lucas was certain they were going to collide head-on. He could see the other vehicle clearly now, a black SUV with tinted windows, expensive and menacing. He could see the driver, a shadowy figure behind the wheel. At the last possible second, Beth swerved right, threading the needle between the SUV and the trees. Metal scraped metal with a shriek that set Lucas's teeth on edge, and then they were past, racing back toward the main road. The SUV tried to turn, but it was too big, too slow. It got stuck trying to navigate the narrow track, its back end sliding into a ditch. Go, 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 Lucas urged, and Beth didn't need encouragement. They hit the main road, and she turned hard, tires screaming, accelerating away from their pursuers. Lucas kept his eyes on the mirror, watching for the SUV to emerge from the dirt road. 5 seconds. 10. 30. Nothing. Did we lose them? Ben asked in a small voice. I think so, buddy. I think we did. But Lucas knew it was temporary. The SUV would get unstuck, would rejoin the pursuit. They'd bought themselves time, nothing more. Change of plans, he said. We can't lead them to the church. Too dangerous, too many innocent people. We need somewhere else, somewhere we can defend. The cabin, Emily said. Your father's cabin. It's remote, it's defensible, and if they don't know about it, it's 3 hours away and we just used up a lot of our lead, Beth interrupted. Plus, the sun's coming up in about 4 hours. We'd be on the road in daylight. Then we drive fast and we hope we're lucky, Lucas said grimly, because right now that cabin is the only safe place I can think of. Beth looked at him in the rearview mirror, her expression saying everything about how much she hated this plan. But she nodded. Fine. But if we're doing this, we're doing it smart. No main highways. They'll be watching those. We take Route 7 north to the county roads, then cut over through the national forest. It's longer, but there's less chance of being spotted. Do it. Beth settled in for the long drive, her foot heavy on the accelerator. In the back seat, Emily held Ben close, whispering reassurances Lucas couldn't hear. Ben was crying quietly, overwhelmed by everything. His mother's return, the terrifying car chase, the fear that radiated from every adult in the vehicle. Lucas checked the rifle, making sure it was loaded, that the safety was on. He'd never shot anyone before, had never imagined he'd be in a situation where he might have to. But looking at his family, his wife, his son, his sister, he knew he'd pull the trigger without hesitation if it meant keeping them safe. They drove through the darkness, eating up miles. Every set of headlights they passed a potential threat. Lucas kept the radio off, listening instead to the hum of the tires on pavement, the sound of Ben's quiet crying, the rasp of his own breathing. Somewhere behind them, people were hunting them. Somewhere ahead, safety was waiting. And in between was nothing but night and fear and the desperate hope that they'd see the sunrise. The miles fell away behind them like breadcrumbs marking their escape, each one a small victory measured in distance from the black SUV and whoever had been driving it. Beth kept the Honda at a steady 75, fast enough to make good time, but not so fast they'd attract attention from any state troopers who might be patrolling. The last thing they needed was to be pulled over, to have to explain why they were fleeing through the night with a hunting rifle and a supposedly dead woman. Ben had finally stopped crying, though his small body still trembled against Emily's side. She stroked his hair with one hand, murmuring soft words that Lucas couldn't quite hear over the engine noise. Watching them in the dim glow of passing streetlights, Lucas felt something crack open in his chest. 3 years of grief and anger and loss, all trying to escape at once. This was what he'd dreamed about in the dark hours after Emily's funeral, when sleep wouldn't come and the silence of their bedroom felt like a living thing trying to suffocate him. His wife holding their son. His family together again. Except nothing was together. Everything was broken and dangerous and wrong. We need to talk about what happens when we get to the cabin, Beth said, her voice cutting through Lucas's thoughts. Assuming we make it there without being followed. We'll make it, Lucas said with more confidence than he felt. Fine, we make it. Then what? We can't hide there forever. Eventually they'll find us, or we'll run out of supplies, or winter will hit and we'll freeze to death because I'm pretty sure that cabin doesn't have working heat anymore. One problem at a time, Beth. No, Lucas, not one problem at a time. We need a plan. A real plan, not just run and hide and hope for the best. Beth's voice was tight with stress and exhaustion. Who are these people? What do they want? And more importantly, how do we make them stop wanting it? Lucas looked back at Emily. You want to take this one? Emily was quiet for a moment, her hand still moving through Ben's hair in soothing strokes. When she spoke, her voice was steady but colored with an exhaustion that went bone deep. They're called the Syndicate. At least that's what Marshall Garrett called them. They're not an organization in the traditional sense, no headquarters, no official structure. They're more like a network of criminals and corrupt officials who've been working together for decades. Like the mob? Beth asked. Worse than the mob in some ways. The mob has rules, territories, hierarchies. The syndicate is more fluid. They're lawyers and judges and businessmen who figured out how to use legitimate systems to facilitate illegitimate activities. Money laundering, drug trafficking, human trafficking, arms dealing. If there's money in it and it's illegal, they've got their fingers in it. And you testified against them, Lucas said. Against some of them. The ones I could prove were guilty. 3 senior partners at my law firm, 2 state legislators, a federal judge, half a dozen other players. But those were just the middle management, Lucas. The real power, the people at the top, they stayed hidden. My testimony helped convict the people I knew about, but it also exposed the existence of the network, and that made me a liability. Because now you could potentially identify more of them, Beth said, understanding dawning. If you saw them, if you recognized them, you could blow their whole operation. Exactly. As long as I was in witness protection, as long as I stayed hidden and quiet, I was controllable. But the moment I tried to leave, the moment I decided I'd had enough. They tried to kill you, Lucas finished. They tried to kill me, Emily confirmed. And now that I've broken cover, now that people know I'm alive, Beth, you, anyone else who saw us tonight, we're all loose ends. They'll tie us up. The car fell silent except for the hum of the engine and the whisper of tires on pavement. Lucas processed this information, trying to fit it into some framework that made sense. His whole adult life had been built on simple, concrete things: fix broken vehicles, pay the bills, raise his son, show up when people needed help. This world Emily was describing felt like something from a movie, not real life. But the bullets had been real enough. The terror in Emily's eyes was real. The black SUV hunting them through the night was real. So how do we fight them? He asked finally. There has to be a way. People don't just get to operate above the law forever. They do when they are the law, Emily said bitterly. That's what makes them so dangerous, Lucas. Some of them wear badges. Some of them sit on benches and make rulings that affect people's lives. How do you fight that? By being smarter than them, Beth said suddenly. By documenting everything, gathering evidence, and finding someone, somewhere, who isn't corrupt. There have to be good people left in law enforcement, in the justice system, people who still care about doing the right thing. Marshall Garrett was one of those people, Emily said softly. He protected me for 3 years, kept me hidden, kept me safe. He believed in the system enough to think we could win by playing by the rules. Was? Lucas caught the past tense. What happened to him? I don't know. That's what scares me. He was supposed to check in with me every week, just a simple coded text message to let me know everything was okay. 3 weeks ago, the messages stopped. I waited, thinking maybe he was just busy. Maybe there was some operational reason for the silence. But then I started hearing things on the news. A federal marshal killed in what police called a home invasion. Nothing taken. No suspects. They didn't release his name, but the description matched Garrett. 53 years old, decorated veteran, lived alone outside Richmond. You think they killed him? I think someone leaked information about where I was being kept, and I think Garrett died trying to protect that information. Emily's voice cracked slightly. He was a good man. He had a daughter in college, a grandson he'd never met. He showed me pictures once, and now he's dead because he tried to help me. Lucas reached back between the seats and found Emily's hand. She gripped his fingers tightly, desperately, and he could feel her shaking. We're going to stop them, he said firmly. I don't know how yet, but we are. They don't get to win. They don't get to take any more from us. Dad? Ben's voice was small and uncertain. Are the bad people going to hurt us? No, buddy. I won't let them. Promise? Lucas hesitated. He'd learned the hard way that promises weren't guarantees, that sometimes terrible things happened despite everyone's best efforts. But looking at his son's frightened face in the rearview mirror, he couldn't bring himself to equivocate. I promise, he said. I will protect you with everything I have. And Mom, too? You'll protect Mom? Yes, your mom, too. Ben seemed satisfied with this, settling back against Emily. Within minutes, his breathing had evened out into sleep, the resilient, adaptable sleep of childhood that could claim you even in crisis. They drove on through the darkness, leaving the developed areas behind and entering the long stretches of forest and farmland that characterize this part of the state. The roads grew narrower, less maintained. Beth had to slow down to navigate potholes and frost heaves that would have torn up the Honda's suspension. "How much further?" Emily asked. "Maybe 90 minutes, Lucas estimated. The cabin's pretty remote. Dad chose the location specifically because he wanted to hunt without hearing traffic or seeing power lines. It's about 5 miles off the main road, down a Forest Service track that most people don't even know exists. No cell service, I'm guessing. None. No electricity either, unless Dad installed solar panels I don't know about, which seems unlikely. We'll have the generator if it still works, but we'll need to use it sparingly or someone might hear it." "Water?" "There's a well. Hand-pumped, but functional last time I was there. That was about 5 years ago, though, so no guarantees." Beth made a sound that might have been a laugh or a sob. "So we're fleeing to a cabin with no power, no phone, no communication with the outside world, and possibly no water. This keeps getting better." "It's defensible," Lucas said. "That's what matters. The cabin sits on high ground with clear sightlines in every direction. There's only one approach road, which means we can see anyone coming from a long way off. And it's surrounded by dense forest. If we need to run, we can disappear into the trees. And if they bring dogs? Helicopters? What's your plan then?" "We improvise," Lucas snapped, his patience fraying. "Beth, I know this isn't ideal. I know we're operating on hope and desperation here, but it's the best option we have. Unless you've got a better idea?" Beth was silent for a moment. Then she sighed, her shoulders dropping slightly. "No, I don't have a better idea. I'm just scared, Lucas. I'm terrified. This is all so far beyond anything I know how to handle." "You think I'm not scared? You think I have any idea what I'm doing?" Lucas's voice softened. "I'm making this up as I go, hoping I don't get my family killed in the process." "You won't," Emily said from the back seat. "Lucas, listen to me. These people, they're dangerous, yes. They're ruthless, and they have resources, but they're also arrogant. They think they're untouchable, think they're smarter than everyone else. That's their weakness. They'll underestimate us." "Will they?" Beth asked. "Because from where I'm sitting, they seem to be doing a pretty good job of hunting us. They found me once, when I wasn't expecting it. That won't happen again. Now we know they're coming. Now we're ready." Lucas studied Emily's reflection in the rearview mirror. 3 years had changed her in ways he was only beginning to understand. The woman he'd married had been brave but peaceful, someone who believed in working within the system, in trusting institutions and authorities. This woman who'd come back from the dead had harder edges, sharper instincts. She'd learned to survive in a world where trust got you killed. The sky was beginning to lighten in the east, the absolute black of night giving way to deep blue. Dawn was coming, which meant they'd been on the road for nearly 3 hours. Lucas's body ached from the adrenaline crash, from the cold water of the river, from the tension of the drive. He wanted nothing more than to stop, to rest, to close his eyes and pretend none of this was happening. But he couldn't. Not yet. "There," he said, pointing to a gap in the trees barely visible in the pre-dawn gloom. "That's the turnoff. Beth, you're going to want to go slow. This road is rough." Beth turned onto what was generously called a road and more accurately described as 2 tire ruts separated by a ridge of grass and weeds. The Honda bumped and scraped along, branches scraping the sides with sounds that made Beth wince. The forest pressed in close on both sides, dense and dark and primordial. They crawled along at maybe 10 miles per hour, the cabin's suspension protesting every rock and root. Lucas kept his eyes forward, watching for the landmarks he remembered. The lightning-struck oak tree on the right, the boulder shaped like a sleeping bear on the left, the small creek that crossed the road and turned it into a mud pit when it rained. "How much further?" Beth asked through gritted teeth as the car bottomed out over a particularly vicious bump. "Half a mile, maybe less." The forest began to thin, and then suddenly they emerged into a clearing. The cabin stood in the center, exactly as Lucas remembered it. a small, sturdy structure built from logs and stubbornness by his grandfather 50 years ago and maintained sporadically by his father until the old man's death. It wasn't much to look at, single story with a stone chimney and a corrugated metal roof that had rusted to a warm orange. The windows were intact but filthy. The porch sagged slightly on one side. But it was standing, solid, real. Home, at least for now. Beth pulled the car around behind the cabin, parking it where it wouldn't be visible from the approach road. They sat there for a moment in silence, all of them staring at the cabin as if it might disappear if they looked away. "Okay," Lucas said finally. "Here's what we do. Beth, you take Ben inside, get him settled. There should be some old canned goods in the pantry if the mice haven't gotten to them, and there are sleeping bags in the closet. Emily and I will do a perimeter check, make sure we're alone out here." "I should help with the perimeter," Emily said. "You should be with Ben when he wakes up," Lucas countered gently. "He's going to be confused and scared. He needs his mother." Emily's face did something complicated. Gratitude and grief and fear all mixed together. She nodded. "Okay. But Lucas, be careful. If there's any sign they followed us, any indication we're not alone, I'll come get you immediately, I promise." They exited the car as quietly as they could. The morning air was cold and smelled of pine needles and wood smoke from some distant chimney. Birds were beginning their dawn chorus, oblivious to the human drama unfolding beneath their branches. Lucas grabbed the rifle and the pack of supplies from the trunk, while Beth scooped up Ben, carrying him toward the cabin. The boy stirred but didn't wake, his head resting against his aunt's shoulder. Emily went with them, and Lucas watched until they disappeared inside the cabin. Then he turned his attention to the clearing, studying it with tactical eyes for the first time. The cabin sat on a slight rise, giving it a commanding view of the approach road and the surrounding forest. The clearing was maybe 50 yards across, roughly circular, with stumps marking where trees had been cleared decades ago. Good sight lines, just as he'd remembered. Anyone approaching would have to cross open ground to reach the cabin, which meant they'd be visible and vulnerable. Of course, that also meant that Lucas and his family would be vulnerable if someone decided to shoot from the tree line. Nothing was ever perfect. He walked the perimeter of the clearing, rifle at the ready, looking for any signs of recent activity. Boot prints, tire tracks, cigarette butts, anything that would indicate they weren't alone. But there was nothing except animal tracks and the normal detritus of a forest. Fallen branches, pine cones, last year's leaves slowly decomposing into soil. When he completed his circuit, he checked the approach road, walking back down it about a quarter mile. Still nothing. If someone had followed them, they were being extraordinarily careful about it. Or they were waiting, watching, biding their time. Lucas shook off that thought and headed back to the cabin. The front door stood open and he could hear voices inside. Beth's practical tone explaining where things were, Emily's softer voice responding, Ben asking questions in the perpetual stream of consciousness way of 7-year-olds. He stepped inside and was immediately hit with a wave of nostalgia. The cabin looked exactly as it had when he was a child coming here with his father. Rough-hewn furniture his grandfather had built by hand, a cast-iron stove in the corner for heat and cooking, shelves lined with ancient paperbacks and board games with missing pieces. Dust covered everything, and there were mouse droppings in the corners, but the structure was sound. The roof wasn't leaking. The windows could be latched from inside. It would do. "Find anything?" Emily asked. She'd found an old flannel shirt somewhere and put it on over her torn and dirty clothes. It was too big for her, hanging almost to her knees, but it made her look less like a woman who'd recently been pulled from a river and more like someone who belonged in this rustic setting. "Nothing. We're alone out here, as far as I can tell." "That's good." But Emily didn't look relieved. She looked worried, and Lucas understood why. Being alone was good in that it meant they weren't being actively hunted at this moment. But it also meant they were isolated, cut off, with no way to call for help if they needed it. Beth emerged from what passed for a bedroom, her arms full of sleeping bags. The good news is these are mostly intact. The bad news is they smell like wet dog and mothballs. Also, we have exactly 12 cans of food, mostly soup and beans, 3 bottles of water that are probably safe to drink, and no coffee. So this is basically hell. "The well?" Lucas asked. I checked. The pump works, water looks clear. We'll need to boil it to be safe, but we won't die of thirst. That's something. It's not much, but yes, it's something. Beth set down the sleeping bags and faced Lucas directly. Okay, we've made it here. We're hidden. Now what? What's the actual plan, Lucas? Because hide in the woods and hope for the best isn't sustainable. Lucas had been dreading this question because he didn't have a good answer. He looked at Emily, hoping she might have some insight he lacked. She met his gaze steadily, and in her eyes he saw the same uncertainty he felt. We need evidence, Emily said finally. Solid, undeniable evidence of what the syndicate is doing and who's involved. The kind of evidence that can't be suppressed or explained away, and we need to get it to someone trustworthy. Someone who has the power to act on it and the integrity to actually do so. Your testimony wasn't enough? Beth asked. My testimony put away some of the smaller players, but the prosecution cut deals with some of them, and those deals are predicated on my continued existence as a potential witness. If I'm dead, the deals fall apart and the cases get reopened. That's why they want me gone. It's not just revenge, it's practical. My death serves a purpose. So we keep you alive, Lucas said. That's step one. As long as you're alive, they have a problem. And step two is we expose enough of their operation that killing me becomes pointless. If the information is already out there, if enough people know the truth, then my death doesn't accomplish anything. How do we do that? Beth demanded. We're hiding in a cabin in the middle of nowhere, with no phone, no internet, no way to communicate with the outside world. We can't exactly call a press conference. Emily was quiet for a moment, thinking. Then her eyes lit up with something that looked like hope. Marshall Garrett had files. Physical files, not digital ones. He didn't trust electronic records, said they were too easy to hack, too easy to alter. He kept hard copies of everything related to my case locked in a safe in his office. His office in Richmond? Lucas asked. That's 8 hours from here, and we'd be walking into the heart of federal law enforcement. That seems like a terrible idea. Not his official office. His home office. The house where he was killed. Emily's expression was grim. The safe was hidden, built into the floor of his bedroom closet. Unless whoever killed him knew exactly what they were looking for, there's a good chance those files are still there. And what good does that do us? We can't just break into a crime scene and steal evidence. We wouldn't be stealing it. Those files document crimes, real crimes committed by real people. They're evidence of corruption and trafficking and murder. If we can get them to the right person. Who's the right person? Beth interrupted. Emily, you said yourself that the syndicate has people everywhere. How do we know who to trust? There's a reporter, Emily said slowly. Investigative journalist named Sarah Chen. She works for the Washington Post. Garrett mentioned her once, said she'd been asking questions about corruption in federal law enforcement, digging into things that made powerful people nervous. If we can get the files to her, if we can give her enough information to publish a story, they'll kill her too, Lucas said flatly. Just like they killed Garrett. Just like they're trying to kill you. Maybe. Or maybe once the story is public, once it's out there for everyone to see, it'll be too late. The syndicate operates in shadows, Lucas. They survive because people don't know they exist. But shine a bright enough light on them, and they'll scatter like roaches. It was a thin hope, fragile as spun glass, but it was the only hope they had. Okay, Lucas said. Say we do this. Say we go to Richmond, break into Garrett's house, steal his files, and somehow get them to this reporter without being caught or killed. That's assuming the files still exist, assuming we can find them, assuming Chen is actually trustworthy and not part of the network herself. That's a lot of assumptions. I know, Emily said. But it's better than sitting here waiting for them to find us. Is it? Lucas gestured around the cabin. We're safe here, Emily. We're hidden. We have food and water and shelter. We could stay here for weeks if we had to, long enough for things to cool down, for them to give up looking. They won't give up, Emily said softly. Lucas, I lived with them watching me for 3 years. I know how they think, how patient they are. They'll wait as long as it takes. And eventually we'll make a mistake. We'll run out of food, or Ben will need a doctor, or winter will come and we'll freeze. They just have to wait us out. She was right. Lucas hated that she was right, but she was. There's another problem, Beth said. I have a job. I have responsibilities. I can't just disappear into the woods indefinitely. People will notice I'm gone. Will start asking questions. Let them ask, Lucas said. Let them wonder. Your life is more important than your job. It's not just about the job, it's about the questions. If people start looking for me, start investigating my disappearance, that draws attention. And attention is the last thing we need right now. Lucas rubbed his face with both hands, exhaustion making his thoughts sluggish. They were talking in circles, identifying problems without solutions, pointing out dangers without offering alternatives. They needed to sleep, needed to eat, needed to think clearly. But there wasn't time for any of that. 24 hours, he said finally. We stay here for 24 hours. We rest, we plan, we figure out our next move carefully instead of just reacting. Then, if we decide going to Richmond is the right call, we go. But we do it smart, with backup plans and exit strategies. Agreed? Emily and Beth exchanged glances, some wordless communication passing between them. Finally, they both nodded. Agreed, Emily said. Fine, Beth added. But I'm sleeping first. I've been awake for almost 24 hours and I'm about to collapse. I'll take first watch, Lucas offered. I can sleep later. They divided up the sleeping bags. Beth claimed the bedroom, such as it was, while Emily and Ben took the sleeping bags by the fireplace. Lucas positioned himself by the window with the rifle across his lap, watching the tree line as the sun climbed higher in the sky. The cabin grew warmer as the morning progressed, shafts of sunlight slanting through the dirty windows and illuminating the dust motes that danced in the air. Lucas could hear Beth's soft snoring from the bedroom, Ben's quieter breathing from the floor. Emily lay awake for a long time, staring at the ceiling, before exhaustion finally claimed her too. And Lucas sat vigil, watching and waiting, his mind turning over everything that had happened in the last 12 hours. His wife had returned from the dead. They'd been hunted, shot at, chased through the night, and now they were fugitives hiding in a cabin in the woods, planning a desperate gambit to steal evidence from a murdered federal marshal. His life had been simple once, predictable. He'd go to work, come home, tuck Ben into bed, watch television until he fell asleep on the couch. He'd been lonely and sad, yes, but also safe, comfortable, normal. He'd trade anything to have that simplicity back. But he'd trade everything to keep Emily and Ben safe, and those two desires were apparently incompatible. So he sat and watched the forest and held the rifle and waited for whatever came next. The hours crept by with agonizing slowness. Lucas's eyes burned with fatigue, his body screaming for rest, but he didn't dare close them. Every rustle of leaves, every snap of a branch, every bird call had him tensing, ready to raise the alarm. But nothing came. The forest remained peaceful, undisturbed, innocent. Around noon, Ben woke up and padded over to where Lucas sat. "Dad? I'm hungry." "Me too, buddy. Let's see what we can find." They moved quietly so as not to wake Emily or Beth. In the tiny kitchen area, Lucas opened one of the cans, chicken noodle soup, miraculously not expired. He poured it into a dented pot and set it on the old wood stove, coaxing the embers of the fire he'd built earlier into something that would heat their meal. Ben watched this process with solemn eyes, unusually quiet. Finally, he asked, "Is Mom really back? Or am I dreaming?" Lucas's heart clenched. "She's really back, Ben. I know it's confusing. I'm confused too, but she's real and she's here and she loves you very much." "Where did she go? Why did she leave? How did you explain witness protection and criminal conspiracies to a 7-year-old? How did you make sense of something that barely made sense to you?" "She didn't want to leave," Lucas said carefully. "Some very bad people were trying to hurt her, and the only way to keep her safe, and to keep us safe, was for her to go away for a while. But she thought about you every single day, buddy. She missed you so much." "Did she miss you too?" "Yeah, she missed me too." "Are you going to get married again?" The question caught Lucas off guard. We're We were already married, Ben. We still are, technically. But you said she was dead. I thought she was. Everyone thought she was. But she wasn't, and now she's back. And we're going to figure out what that means, okay? Ben nodded slowly, processing this. Then, I like having a mom again. Yeah, Lucas said, his voice thick. Me too, buddy. Me too. They ate the soup straight from the pot, passing it back and forth, both of them too hungry to care about plates or proper utensils. It was the best thing Lucas had ever tasted, hot and salty and real. Emily woke while they were eating and joined them, accepting the pot gratefully. Is there more? 10 more cans where that came from, Lucas said. We won't starve. We might get tired of soup and beans, but we won't starve. I've eaten worse. Emily finished the soup and set the pot aside. She looked at Ben, really looked at him, drinking in the sight of him in the daylight. You got so big, she said softly. You were so little when I left. Now you're practically a man. I'm 7, Ben said seriously. That's not a man yet. No, but you're getting there. Tell me about school. Tell me about your friends. Tell me everything. And Ben did. He talked about his teacher, Mrs. Henderson, and his best friend, Jake, and the science project about volcanoes they'd done together. He talked about learning to ride his bike without training wheels and the tooth he'd lost last month. He talked and talked and talked, 3 years of life spilling out in a rush, and Emily listened to every word as if it was the most important thing she'd ever heard. Lucas watched them, mother and son reconnecting, and felt something unknot in his chest. Whatever happened next, whatever dangers they still faced, at least they had this moment. At least Ben was getting his mother back. Beth emerged from the bedroom around 2 o'clock, looking marginally more human. Please tell me there's food. Soup, Lucas said. Always soup. I'll take it. She heated herself a can and ate standing up, studying the cabin's interior with a critical eye. We need to secure this place better. The door doesn't lock properly, the windows don't have any kind of reinforcement, and there's only one exit. If someone comes, we're sitting ducks. I can board up some of the windows, Lucas offered. There's lumber in the shed out back, should be nails and a hammer too. We can create firing positions with clear sightlines while still maintaining cover. Listen to you, all tactical, Beth said. When did you become an expert in defensive fortifications? I'm not. I'm making it up as I go. Lucas stood, stretching muscles that had gone stiff from hours of sitting. But I watched enough action movies with Dad to have some ideas. Emily, you feeling up to helping? Yeah. Ben, honey, you stay inside with Aunt Beth, okay? Don't go outside unless one of us is with you. Why? Because I said so, Emily replied, using the universal parental explanation that required no further justification. Lucas and Emily spent the next few hours reinforcing the cabin as best they could. They found wood in the shed as expected, along with tools that had seen better days but were still functional. They boarded up all but 2 of the windows, one facing the approach road, one facing the back of the property, creating narrow slits that would allow them to see out and potentially shoot if necessary while protecting them from incoming fire. Working together felt strange and familiar all at once. They'd renovated their first apartment together, had painted Ben's nursery together, had assembled countless pieces of furniture while arguing good-naturedly about whether the instructions made any sense. This was like that, except instead of building something new, they were preparing for war. I keep thinking I'm going to wake up, Emily said as she hammered a nail into place, that this is all some elaborate dream or hallucination, that I'm still in my safe house in Montana or wherever they had me last, and none of this is real. Montana? Lucas asked. That's where I was living. Small town called Whitefish, up near Glacier National Park. I was working at a library, living in an apartment above a pizza place, going by the name Sarah Mills. It was quiet, safe, boring as hell. What made you decide to leave? Emily was silent for a long moment, her hands stilling on the hammer. I saw Ben's picture, she said finally. Garrett had been adamant that I couldn't have any contact with my old life, couldn't know anything about you or Ben. He said it was for my own good, that it would make the separation easier. But one day I was in a coffee shop and someone left their phone on the table. The screen was unlocked and I couldn't help myself. I looked you up on Facebook." Lucas remembered his Facebook profile. He rarely posted, but his sister tagged him in things sometimes, and he'd shared a few pictures of Ben over the years because Emily's parents, who lived in Florida now, liked to see their grandson. "You were at his birthday party," Emily continued, "the one for his 6th birthday. You'd taken him to that arcade place he loves, and Beth had posted this photo of him with his face covered in cake, grinning like a maniac. And you were standing behind him with your hand on his shoulder, and you were smiling too. But I could see it in your eyes, the sadness, the loss. You were doing your best, but you were broken, Lucas. And I did that to you. My choices, my investigation, my need to expose the truth, I broke our family." "Emily?" "No, let me finish. I saw that picture and I realized I couldn't do it anymore. I couldn't keep living this half-life, this pretend existence where I was someone else. I wanted to come home. I wanted to see my son blow out his candles. I wanted to tell you I was sorry. I wanted—" Her voice broke. "I just wanted my life back." Lucas set down his hammer and pulled her into his arms. She came willingly, burying her face against his chest, and he could feel her tears soaking through his shirt. "You didn't break us," he said firmly. "They broke us. The people who tried to kill you, the people who forced you into hiding, they broke us. Not you. Never you. I could have made different choices. I could have gone to the FBI sooner, been more careful, not pushed so hard. You did what you thought was right. You tried to expose criminals and make the world a better place. That's not something to apologize for. Even if it cost us 3 years? Even then." Lucas pulled back enough to look at her face. "Emily, I won't lie to you. Those 3 years were hell. There were days I didn't think I could keep going, didn't think I could be what Ben needed. But we survived. We made it through. And now you're back, and maybe we can find a way to be a family again." "You'd want that? Even after everything?" "Of course I want that. You're my wife. I love you. I never stopped loving you." Emily kissed him then, sudden and fierce, tasting of salt and tears and desperation. Lucas kissed her back. 3 years of grief and longing pouring into that single moment of connection. When they finally broke apart, they were both shaking. "We're going to survive this," Emily said. "We're going to stop the syndicate, expose their crimes, and we're going to survive. And then we're going to go home and we're going to be a family again. That's not a wish or a hope. It's a promise. I'm going to hold you to that promise. Please do." They finished boarding up the windows as the afternoon shadows grew longer. By the time they were done, the cabin looked more like a bunker than a vacation retreat, but it felt safer, more defensible, like a place where they might actually have a chance. Beth had used their time productively as well, taking inventory of their supplies and creating what she called a bug-out bag, a backpack filled with food, water, first aid supplies, and anything else they might need if they had to leave the cabin in a hurry. "We should have multiple bags," she said, showing them her work. "One for each of us. That way, if we get separated, we all have what we need to survive." "We're not getting separated," Lucas said. "Humor me. Better to have it and not need it than need it and not have it." They spent the rest of the daylight hours preparing. Lucas cleaned and checked the rifle, making sure it was in working order. Emily went through the cabin inch by inch, identifying potential weak points and resources. Beth drilled Ben on what to do in various emergency scenarios, where to hide, how to stay quiet, what to do if the adults weren't available. As the sun set and darkness began to reclaim the forest, they gathered around the wood stove. Beth had managed to heat up more soup and they'd found some stale crackers that were still edible if you didn't think about them too hard. It wasn't much of a meal, but it was warm and it was shared. And for a brief moment they could pretend they were just a family on a camping trip, roughing it in the wilderness by choice rather than necessity. Ben fell asleep early, exhausted by the day's events and lulled by the warmth of the fire. Beth carried him to one of the sleeping bags and tucked him in with a tenderness that made Lucas's throat tight. "He's a good kid," Beth said quietly, rejoining Lucas and Emily by the stove. "You've done a good job with him, Lucas." I tried. Some days better than others. That's all any parent can do. Beth poked at the fire with a stick, sending sparks spiraling up toward the chimney. So, Richmond. Are we really doing this? I think we have to, Emily said. It's the only play we have. Then we need a plan. A real one, with contingencies and backup options and everything Dad used to drone on about during his military stories. Lucas smiled despite himself. Their father had been a Marine, had served 2 tours in Vietnam, and had come home with a head full of tactical knowledge and a deep suspicion of authority. He'd drilled basic survival skills into his children whether they wanted them or not. How to read a map, how to start a fire without matches, how to move through hostile territory without being detected. At the time, Lucas had thought it was all unnecessarily paranoid. Now he was grateful for every lesson. Okay, he said. Let's plan. Beth, you're the detail person. What do we need to consider? Transportation, Beth said immediately. We can't take my car. It's probably been identified by now. We need a different vehicle. We could steal one, Emily suggested. Or we could borrow one, Beth countered. I have a friend who lives about 40 miles from here. Retired school teacher, lives alone, has a garage full of old cars she inherited from her late husband. She'd let me borrow one if I asked. Would she ask questions? Probably, but I could tell her I'm going on a spontaneous road trip, that my car broke down, something like that. She's known me for years. She'd believe me. That's good, Lucas said. Okay, transportation solved. What else? Identification, Emily said. We can't use our real names, can't use credit cards or anything that leaves a digital trail. We'll need fake IDs, or at least good enough fakes to get us where we need to go. I don't know how to make fake IDs, Beth admitted. You don't have to. I do. At Lucas's surprised look, Emily shrugged. You pick up skills when you're living under an assumed identity for 3 years. I know a guy in Baltimore who makes documents. Good ones. Nearly impossible to detect. It'll cost us, though. How much? $1,000, maybe more. Do we have that kind of money? Lucas thought about his savings account. About $3,000 he'd been putting away for Ben's college fund, for emergencies, for the inevitable day when the transmission on his truck finally gave out for good. He'd never imagined this would count as an emergency, but here they were. I have money, he said. Not on me, obviously, but I can access it. There's a bank branch in the town where Beth's friend lives. I can withdraw cash there. That'll leave a record, Beth pointed out. They'll know where you were. By the time they trace it, we'll already be in Richmond. It's a risk we have to take. They continued planning late into the night, working through scenarios and contingencies until they had something that resembled a workable strategy. In the morning, Beth would go to her friend's house and borrow a car. Lucas would go with her to the bank and withdraw cash. They'd drive to Baltimore, meet with Emily's contact, get the fake IDs, then on to Richmond, where they'd break into Garrett's house under cover of darkness, retrieve the files, and somehow get them to the reporter named Sarah Chen without being caught. It was a terrible plan. It had a million ways to go wrong. But it was the best they had. Around midnight, Lucas took over watch duty while Beth and Emily tried to sleep. He sat by the window with the rifle, watching the darkness, listening to the night sounds of the forest. An owl called from somewhere nearby. Something rustled in the underbrush, probably a raccoon or possum. Normal sounds, peaceful sounds. He must have dozed off at some point because he woke to Emily's hand on his shoulder and pale light filtering through the gaps in the boarded windows. Morning, they'd made it through another night. Your turn to sleep, Emily said softly. I'll keep watch. Lucas wanted to protest, wanted to say he was fine, but his body had other ideas. He was asleep almost before his head hit the sleeping bag. He dreamed of rivers and drowning, of women with Emily's face sinking beneath dark water, of reaching for them and always being just too far away to help. He woke gasping, disoriented, to find Ben sitting next to him playing with a toy car he must have brought from Beth's house. Bad dream? Ben asked. Yeah, bad dream. Me too sometimes. Mom says... Ben stopped, confused. My old mom said bad dreams can't hurt you. Is my new mom the same as my old mom? She's the same person, buddy. Same mom, just... She was away for a while and now she's back. Oh, okay. Ben seemed satisfied with this explanation and went back to his toy car, making quiet vroom vroom sounds as he drove it across the floor. Lucas sat up, rubbing his face. Through the window, he could see the sun was high, late morning, maybe almost noon. He'd slept for hours. Beth and Emily were deep in conversation by the stove, their voices too low for him to make out the words. When they noticed he was awake, they came over. "Change of plans," Beth said without preamble. "Emily thinks we should split up." "What?" "No, absolutely not." "Hear me out," Emily said. "Beth is right. Her car is probably compromised. But more than that, all of us traveling together is conspicuous. A man, 2 women, and a child. That's memorable. People will notice us. But if we split up—" "No," Lucas said again. "We stay together. That's non-negotiable." "Lucas, think about it strategically. Beth goes alone to borrow the car. That's normal, not suspicious. You and I take Ben and find our own way to Baltimore." "How? Walk? We're in the middle of nowhere." "There's a bus station in Cooper's Mill, about 15 miles from here. We could hike there, catch a bus to Baltimore, meet up with Beth later." 15 miles through the woods with a 7-year-old? "I can do it," Ben piped up. "I'm strong." "It's not about being strong, buddy. It's about being safe." Lucas looked at Emily and Beth. "I understand the logic. I do. But the answer is still no. We stay together or we don't go at all." Emily and Beth exchanged glances. Finally, Emily sighed. "Fine, we stay together. But we need to be smart about this, Lucas. We need to be careful." "I know, and we will be. But we will be careful together." They loaded up the car with their meager supplies, making sure the cabin looked relatively undisturbed in case anyone came looking. Lucas took one last look around, memorizing the place, wondering if they'd ever come back. Then they climbed into Beth's Honda and headed out, back down the rutted forest road, back toward civilization and danger and whatever fate had in store for them. The drive to Beth's friend's house took them through winding country roads that seemed designed to test the Honda's suspension and Beth's patience in equal measure. Lucas rode shotgun with the rifle concealed under a blanket at his feet, his eyes constantly scanning the roads ahead and behind for any sign they were being followed. Emily sat in back with Ben, playing quiet games to keep him occupied. I Spy, 20 questions, counting cows in the fields they passed. Normal things, safe things, as if they were just a family on a Sunday drive instead of fugitives running for their lives. The normalcy felt obscene somehow, wrong in a way Lucas couldn't articulate. But Ben needed it, needed to feel like the world wasn't ending around him, so they all played along with the pretense. Beth's friend lived in a farmhouse that had probably been beautiful once, but now leaned toward picturesque decay. Peeling paint, sagging gutters, a porch that looked like it was held together by habit and prayer. But the lawn was neatly mowed and flower boxes hung under the windows, still bright with late-season blooms. Someone cared about this place, even if they couldn't quite keep up with all the maintenance it needed. "Her name is Margaret Hayes," Beth said as she pulled into the long gravel driveway. "We taught together for 15 years before she retired. She's sharp as a tack but a little hard of hearing, so you'll need to speak up. And whatever you do, don't mention her late husband Carl unless you want to hear a 3-hour story about their cruise to Alaska." "Got it," Lucas said. "We're just here to borrow a car." "Exactly. Simple and straightforward. Let me do the talking." Beth got out and walked up to the front door, her posture deliberately casual, friendly, non-threatening. Lucas watched through the windshield as she knocked, waited, knocked again. After what felt like an eternity, the door opened to reveal a tiny woman with white hair and bright, intelligent eyes behind thick glasses. The conversation that followed was too quiet for Lucas to hear, but he could read the body language. Margaret's initial surprise giving way to concern, Beth's reassuring gestures, her warm smile. Margaret glancing past Beth to the car in the driveway, probably wondering about the passengers waiting inside. More conversation, then Margaret nodding and disappearing back into the house. "Think she bought it?" Emily asked from the back seat. "Beth's a good liar when she needs to be," Lucas said. "Comes from years of teaching teenagers. You learn to smell their bullshit from a mile away, which means you learn how to produce better bullshit yourself." That's a horrible lesson to teach children. That's survival. Welcome to the real world. Margaret reappeared with a set of keys in her hand and led Beth around the side of the house toward what Lucas assumed was the garage. They disappeared from view for a few minutes, and Lucas felt his anxiety ratchet up another notch. Every moment they stayed in one place was another moment for something to go wrong, for someone to spot them, for their luck to run out. "Dad?" Ben's voice was small and uncertain. "Are we in trouble?" Lucas turned in his seat to look at his son. Ben was pressed against Emily's side, his eyes wide and scared despite the games they'd been playing. He wasn't stupid. He knew something was wrong, even if he didn't fully understand what. "We're in a complicated situation," Lucas said carefully. "There are some people who want to hurt your mom, and we're trying to keep her safe. That means we have to be very careful for a while, but I promise you, buddy, I promise we're going to be okay." "Cross your heart?" Lucas made the gesture, drawing an X over his heart the way he used to when Ben was smaller. "Cross my heart." "And hope to die?" "Let's skip that part," Emily interjected quickly. "No hoping to die. How about cross my heart and hope to fly? That's much better." Ben considered this amendment and nodded. "Okay. Hope to fly." The garage door rolled up with a screech of protesting metal, and a moment later Beth emerged driving a vehicle that made Lucas's heart sink. It was a conversion van from the 1980s, painted a shade of brown that could charitably be called rust, and less charitably called mistake. It had bubble windows along the sides and a mural on the back depicting a wizard riding a dragon through outer space. It was the single most conspicuous vehicle Lucas had ever seen. Beth pulled up next to the Honda and rolled down the window. "Don't say a word," she warned. "This was the only vehicle that ran." "We can't drive that to Richmond," Lucas said. "We might as well paint fugitives on board on the side." "You have a better idea?" "Because I'm all ears." Lucas didn't have a better idea. He looked at Emily, hoping she might have some alternative suggestion, but she just shrugged helplessly. "The wizard van it is, then," she said. They transferred their supplies from the Honda to the van while Margaret watched from the porch, her expression a mixture of curiosity and concern. Beth went back to say a proper goodbye, and Lucas saw her hug the older woman, saw Margaret's hand come up to pat Beth's cheek in a grandmotherly gesture. When Beth returned to the van, her eyes were bright with unshed tears. "She knows something's wrong," Beth said quietly. "She didn't ask questions, but she knows. She told me to be safe and to call her when I could. God, I hope we don't get her in trouble." "She'll be fine," Emily said. "She's just a friend helping out another friend. There's nothing illegal about that." "Everything we're doing is illegal," Beth pointed out. "We're fleeing a crime scene, planning to break into a federal marshal's house, stealing evidence." "We're not stealing evidence. We're recovering it. There's a difference. Tell that to the judge when we get arrested." Lucas climbed into the driver's seat of the van, and immediately his estimation of the situation worsened. The steering wheel was enormous, wrapped in cracked leather. The dashboard looked like something from a space shuttle, all analog gauges and mysterious buttons. The seats were upholstered in crushed velvet that had gone threadbare in places, and the whole interior smelled like mothballs and old cigarettes. But the engine started, and that was what mattered. "Next stop, Cooper's Mill," Lucas announced. "Beth, you said there's a bank there?" "First National. Should open at 9 on weekdays." Lucas checked the dashboard clock. If it was accurate, which was a big if, it was just past 1 in the afternoon. They had time. Not a lot of it, but some. The drive to Cooper's Mill took 45 minutes on roads that seemed designed by someone who'd never heard of straight lines. The van handled like a boat, wallowing through turns and shuddering whenever they went over 45 miles per hour. Lucas white-knuckled the steering wheel and prayed they wouldn't encounter any actual traffic. Cooper's Mill turned out to be one of those small towns that seemed frozen in time, the kind of place where everybody knew everybody and strangers were noted with friendly suspicion. Main Street was 3 blocks long, lined with brick buildings that probably dated back to the 1920s. There was a diner, a pharmacy, a hardware store, and yes, a First National Bank branch that looked like it had been there since the town was founded. Lucas found parking on a side street where the van would be less visible. "Okay," he said. "Here's how we do this. I go into the bank alone, withdraw the cash. Emily, You and Ben stay in the van with the doors locked. Beth, you keep watch. If anything looks wrong, anything at all, you get out of here. Don't wait for me." "We're not leaving you," Emily said immediately. "You will if you have to. Emily, if I get arrested, if something happens to me, you need to get Ben somewhere safe. That's the priority, Ben's safety. Everything else is secondary." Emily looked like she wanted to argue, but she understood the logic. She nodded reluctantly. "How long should we wait if you don't come out?" 30 minutes. If I'm not back by then, something's gone wrong and you need to leave." "This is a terrible plan," Beth muttered. "You keep saying that, but you never offer anything better." "That's because there isn't anything better. We're improvising a disaster, Lucas." "Then we'll improvise our way out of it too." Lucas took a breath, trying to calm the adrenaline surge that made his hands shake. He'd withdrawn money from banks 1,000 times. This was no different. Except it was completely different, because there was a non-zero chance that his accounts had been flagged, that walking through those doors would trigger some kind of alert, that he'd never make it back out. But they needed the money. Without it, they couldn't get the fake IDs. Without the IDs, they couldn't get to Richmond safely. It was a risk they had to take. He climbed out of the van and walked the 2 blocks to the bank, trying to look like a normal person running normal errands on a normal afternoon. The sun was warm on his shoulders. A few people passed him on the sidewalk, offering friendly nods that he returned. A dog barked from someone's yard, completely ordinary. The bank was small inside, just 3 teller windows and a couple of desks for the loan officers. An older woman stood at one of the teller windows, chatting with the clerk about her grandson's baseball game. A man in work coveralls was filling out a deposit slip at the counter. Normal. Safe. Lucas got in line behind the older woman, his heart hammering against his ribs so hard he was sure everyone could hear it. He forced himself to breathe normally, to not look around nervously, to project confidence he didn't feel. The woman finally finished her transaction and left with a cheerful goodbye. Lucas stepped up to the window, where a young teller with a name tag that read Christie gave him a professional smile. "Good afternoon, sir. How can I help you today?" "I need to make a withdrawal," Lucas said. "From savings. $3,000. Christie's smile didn't waver, but something flickered in her eyes. $3,000 was a lot of cash for a small-town bank transaction. "Of course. I'll just need to see your ID and account information." Lucas handed over his driver's license and recited his account number from memory. Christie typed something into her computer, her manicured nails clicking against the keys. The seconds stretched into hours. Lucas became hyper-aware of everything: the hum of the fluorescent lights overhead, the whisper of the air conditioning, the other customer finishing his business and leaving. Christie frowned at her screen. "I'm sorry, Mr. Reed. The system is being a little slow today. It'll just be a moment." Lucas's stomach dropped. Was this it? Was this where it all went wrong? He resisted the urge to bolt, to run back to the van and tell them to drive, drive, drive. Instead, he forced a casual smile. "No problem. Take your time." More typing, more waiting. Then Christie looked up with an apologetic expression. "I'm going to need to get my manager to approve a withdrawal this large. It's just bank policy for amounts over $2,000. Would you mind waiting just a moment?" "Sure, no problem." No. Christie disappeared into a back office and Lucas was left standing at the window, completely exposed, his mind racing through worst-case scenarios. The manager would come out. The manager would make a phone call. The phone call would go to someone who'd been waiting for Lucas Reed to surface somewhere, anywhere. Police would arrive. He'd be arrested. Emily and Ben would be alone. But when Christie returned, she was accompanied by a middle-aged man in a suit who looked more bored than suspicious. He glanced at Lucas's ID, asked him to confirm the account number one more time, then nodded to Christie. "Go ahead and process the withdrawal." "Thank you, Mr. Patterson." Christie turned back to Lucas. "And how would you like the cash?" "Hundreds are fine." She counted out 30 $100 bills with the efficiency of someone who'd done this 1,000 times. Lucas signed the withdrawal slip, accepted the cash, and somehow managed to walk out of the bank instead of running. The sunlight hit him like a physical force, and he had to stop for a moment on the sidewalk, dizzy with relief. He'd done it. The money was in his pocket. crisp and real and sufficient for their needs. He made it back to the van without incident and climbed into the driver's seat, his hands still shaking slightly. "We're good. I got it." Emily sagged against the back of her seat. "Thank God. I was about 2 minutes away from coming in after you." "How long was I gone?" 12 minutes. It felt like 12 hours. Beth was staring at him with an odd expression. "You know what this means, right? You just left a digital trail pointing directly at Cooper's Mill. If anyone's looking for us, they'll know we were here, yeah. But by the time they trace it, we'll already be in Baltimore. We just have to stay ahead of them. And if we can't, then we improvise. Again. Now let's get out of here before our luck runs out." The drive to Baltimore took them most of the afternoon and into the early evening. They stuck to back roads when possible, avoiding highways and toll booths and anywhere with traffic cameras that might capture an image of the wizard van. It was slower, more tedious, but safer. Ben fell asleep in the back, his head on Emily's lap, and Beth dozed in the passenger seat. Only Lucas and Emily remained alert, their conversation a quiet murmur beneath the rumble of the van's engine. "Tell me about him," Emily said. "About Ben. Tell me everything I missed." So Lucas did. He told her about Ben's first day of kindergarten, how he'd cried for 5 minutes and then gotten distracted by the fish tank in the classroom. He told her about the time Ben had tried to make breakfast in bed for Lucas on Father's Day and had nearly burned down the kitchen. He told her about parent-teacher conferences and soccer practices and the elaborate Lego cities Ben built in the living room. 3 years of life, condensed into stories and memories. Emily listened to all of it, crying silently, her hand stroking Ben's hair. "I missed so much," she whispered. "So many moments I can never get back." "Then we'll make new moments," Lucas said. "Better ones. When this is over, when we're safe, we'll make up for lost time." "Do you really believe that? That this can be over? That we can go back to normal?" Lucas thought about that question, about what normal even meant anymore. Their old life was gone, shattered beyond repair. But maybe they could build something new from the pieces. "I believe we can try," he said finally. "That's all any of us can do. Try." They reached Baltimore just as the sun was setting, the sky painted in shades of orange and purple that would have been beautiful if Lucas had any capacity left to appreciate beauty. The city rose up around them, all brick and steel and humanity packed together, and Lucas felt simultaneously safer and more exposed.